Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Mr. Vice President, I'm going off script again, I know, but I just want to personally thank you. We've been through some stuff. We've gone through some of the most complex military operations this country's ever conducted, and your steady hand and your leadership during those was a great source of strength for me. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your character. Thank you for your selfless service. Thank you for commitment. Thank you for being a mentor to me, Mr. Vice President.
It's called the swamp. And you know what happened? And you know what I did? A big favor. I caught the swamp. I caught them all. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done that but me. I caught all of this corruption that was going on, and nobody else could have done it. Did I get that one right? Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
This is a president of the United States who is a danger to the Republic.
America first.
He knows he's an illegitimate president.
The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans.
The great Trump recovery.
America will never be a socialist country. I will fight for you with every breath in my body.
Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, Russian, Russia, Russian, 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 the Russians.
Russia.
And I will never, ever let you down.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. What they're doing is using COVID to steal an election. Together, we will make America strong again. You know what it's about? Fraud, fake ballots. We will make America wealthy again. They are trying to steal the election.
Now, under the leadership of President Trump, we are fully realizing President Kennedy's prescient view of Special Operations Forces.
We will make America proud again. And watch, please, those mail-in ballots. We will make America safe again. And in millions and millions of ballots. Their vote is under what they thought they needed. They're dumping more ballots in there, okay? And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you. God bless you. If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
Good evening, everybody. Whoa, whoops. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Devolution Power Hour. Hope you guys are having a great week. It's certainly been an interesting one. Mr. Brett, what do you got there?
I got a coffee thermos.
Do you have a mug? Or are you drinking out of that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
You totally should do.
Here's some coffee ASMR. People like that when I do that. Or
sounds like a
sound like anything else. This thing kind of leaks, so it annoys me, but it does keep the coffee warm for like 3 hours, which is necessary.
It's great news.
Yep.
I didn't see a Badlands sticker on it though, so not as impressed anymore.
Branding opportunities abound. If anybody's out there looking.
What's going on with your internet? You're like frozen.
What? Am I frozen? Am I still frozen?
You're very blurry. Looks like you're using
my speed.
You're using your thermos for a camera right now. It's bad.
My speed says I'm good.
Is it on my end?
I don't know. You seem fine to me. It could be a
thanks, bro.
Rumble thing.
Let's
some sort
see.
of technological thingy.
Let me refresh. Yeah, it's definitely you. I look clear as day in the Rumble stream. You look
this is bullshit. Let me see.
Not as clear as day.
Strange.
I think.
What the hell?
Something's going on, but whatever. Tech issues abound. We will push through it. We got plenty to talk about today. Some exciting things. Well, maybe not as exciting. The JFK files, I would call them underwhelming, to say the least. There are a few interesting things, though, I want to go through because it's like this theme. And I think the theme that we see within the JFK files is the entire reason devolution was needed these last 4 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
The same weaponized agencies that have been conducting illegal psychological warfare against the American people for the last 7 years. That's what Trump is up against, and that's clearly shown in these JFK files. So we'll go through some of that. We also got a new executive order from Trump that talks a lot about updating the continuity policy, and my jimmies have been rustling since this morning when I saw it. So we'll talk about that as well. Maybe some economic things. Who knows? But yeah. How's the baby doing, by the way?
He's good. He's asleep right now. I don't want to jinx it, but for the last almost week, he's been sleeping like 5 to even one night. It was 8 hours in a row.
Wow.
And he rug pulled me because like I'll get off a show at, whatever it is, 1 a.m. my time, and I'll do a little bit of other work before I go to bed. And I've been in such a mode of just getting used to him waking up as I'm getting off a show that night I didn't go get him because I didn't go to bed because I'm like, he's going to get up any second. And he was like moving around on the monitor, and then he didn't. So I stayed up until like 3:30 a.m. just convinced he was about to wake up, and he didn't wake up. So
and then you fall asleep at 3:30 and he wakes up at like 4, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. So he's, who knows? He's been sleeping like 5+ hours at a time at night. And we need that because Mrs. Bright is going back to the office next week, and we are gonna see what fucking happens. With,
when is she gonna commit to Badlands full time?
What are your terms? What are you
I don't
offering?
know. Let's discuss it right now on air.
Yeah. She's not going back full time, at least for now.
That's good.
It's gonna be part time.
Is she allowed to take the baby with her?
She could, I suppose, but he's
like, isn't that a thing that women can do? Is like take their baby? I know. I'm pretty sure in North Dakota, if you have a state job anyway, and that's not what she has.
Ending.
True, but I'm pretty sure you could just like take your baby to work, and nobody can say a thing, and you can do it till they're like almost 2 or something.
I think she probably could, but I mean, even if it wasn't a law, her office is kind of like a family office. I'm sure they'd allow it, but he's little. He's too little for that. She wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah, that's why it's interesting. Whenever I saw that rule. Anyway, we got some sponsors to get to real quick before we get into the heart of the show. Unless there's anything else you want to talk about. No, what we should talk about is I'm very excited because in a couple months I get to meet that baby of yours.
Oh yeah,
and baby Patel. Can't wait.
Yeah.
And we're going to be meeting them at Plymouth. Gart 8, or is that Gart 9? Gart 8, Plymouth. You guys should get your tickets.
Pumped.
Tickets are on sale. Let me pull this up.
Pretty pumped. For anybody wondering as well, you could fly into either Logan Airport in Boston, or you can do TF Green at Providence. Because Plymouth is kind of between the two. It's a little closer to Boston technically, but if you don't want to deal with that, but
like how far of
worth it.
A ride?
It's like 50 miles from Boston. It's like 65 miles from Providence.
It's that far?
Yeah, but it's pretty similar to Deadwood from.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I mean, it's on the South Shore. It's not in Boston proper. But once we're there, what'll be cool about Plymouth is that it's sort of its own seaside village. So I think once you're at the hotel or wherever you're staying, if it's nearby accommodations, you won't have to go far. You can just walk to everything.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we get good weather, but usually it's decent around that time of year.
You know, I'm excited. I've been trying to figure this out. I don't think I've ever been to like the Northeast at all.
Wow. That's
like
crazy.
None of those states up there. So, but yeah, we are getting close to 50% sold out, or like 45% right now. So
good stuff. Get
your tickets, guys. And we'll be looking to do the Deadwood tickets soonish. We just don't want to cannibalize the Guard 8 tickets yet. So anyway,
similar to Deadwood, even though, you know, the theme or the areas are very different, but I would recommend, and I'm sure most people are doing this, but if you're going to Plymouth, look up a bunch of stuff before you come and figure out what you want to do when you're not involved in Badlands stuff, because there's a lot of there's not going to be like bright signs pointing you. It's not a very touristy thing, even though a lot of tourists go there. Like if you want to look for historical stuff, you got to look it up, and then there's tons of museums, there's tons of stuff to do there, but ton of people live there. Like it's not one of these attractions where the attraction is the economy. Like there is a whole, you know, tens of thousands of people living there, going about their daily lives. So I'd recommend finding some stuff to do, and should be fun.
Well, the stuff you'll do is be at Guard and hang out with Guard family. That's
if you don't want to come to Guard, just like
if you just want to be in the area at the exact same time.
I am being paid by Plymouth, Massachusetts, to promote the town. This event is just to get people in the door.
Gotcha. I did see a question about single day tickets. We can't guarantee we're going to have any because if we sell out of people who want full day tickets or full conference tickets, then there may not be any available. Some of our venues that we get, they're very flexible, like Deadwood, for instance. We have a pretty large space there. They can accommodate lots of people. We don't really have a cap. Same thing with Vegas, large space, don't really have a cap on tickets. But some of the smaller venues, we do. So this is one of those. We can't guarantee there'll be single day tickets. We're going to try to figure some stuff out, but we won't know until much closer to the event. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was like one venue that Mrs. Bright even found that felt like could accommodate us. So
yeah,
that's what we're working with. It's a cool place though. We went there.
I'm excited.
It's more rustic, but I like it.
You did? You've been there already?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you?
Damn straight. 30 minutes from my house.
Yeah, I suppose.
Very convenient.
Can I fly into your house and then drive over so I don't have to?
I might fly to Boston and then drive back down.
I'll pick you up in an Uber.
Yeah.
I'll pick you up in my rental car. Okay, let's do our sponsors real quick, and then we'll get rolling with the show here. First up, we got Field of Greens. Today is your lucky day. Field of Greens just kicked off a huge St. Paddy's Day sale. You can get 30% off when you use code LUCK. Look, we don't always eat as healthy as we should, but Field of Greens has your back. One delicious glass is packed with a rainbow of doctor-selected fruits and vegetables to support heart and kidney health, metabolism, and more. So even when you go for the burger instead of the salad, you're still giving your body the good stuff it needs. It's that diet insurance. And during their St. Paddy's Day sale, you can save some green while you drink your greens. Save 30% on all their popular flavors and bundles when you use code LUCK. Whether Field of Greens is already part of your routine or you've been waiting to give it a try, now is your chance to save big. Sale's only on for a few days, so don't miss out. Go to fieldofgreens.com and use promo code LUCK. That's fieldofgreens.com, promo code LUCK. I cannot recommend that product any more than I already do. Still love it. Wild berry flavor is my personal favorite. There is no better diet insurance out there other than like actually exercising and eating right or whatever. The weird things people do to stay in shape.
Yes, yeah. I did want to debunk a bit of misinformation I see in the chat. For some reason, it's not pulling over into my StreamYard thing. Somebody said
because
here,
we're in studio, remember?
Oh, yeah, right. So somebody on Rumble said, Mima58, FYI, Plymouth Rock is enclosed in a cage and it's more like a pebble since it's worn away by the tides. It is enclosed in a cage. It's probably not going to be what you're thinking it's going to be. Other stuff is much cooler in Plymouth. But that is misinformation that it was the tides that wore away Plymouth Rock. It was actually the fact that it became this big tourist destination. Tourists started coming and chiseling away pieces of Plymouth Rock to take home with them as souvenirs. And that is why Plymouth Rock is like 70% smaller than it was a few decades ago. Yeah. Erosion takes millions of years or tens of thousands of years. It doesn't take like 100 years.
Cam and Jackie will be there. Looking forward to seeing them again. Are there other rocks I can chisel away and take home with me, or is it just that one that they fence off?
Many would even suggest that Plymouth Rock is just a rock, that there's no way to know whether or not
nobody will know
it was the rock. So, it's kind of a thing where locals like look at tourists standing around and looking at the rock and kind of smile because, it's one of those things you got to do, but it's just a rock. I'm just telling you guys,
That's crazy.
Don't get
we
all
could
pumped
start a
about
whole
Plymouth
business selling Plymouth Rock rocks. Nobody would know.
Just wear a trench coat and hand out pebbles.
Insane. Okay, one more sponsor, and then we'll get into the show. We have one more sponsor later on. We'll talk about that when we get there. But we got Love Litters. Good friends over at Love Litters. They've been good to us. Attention all you Badlanders with purring pals and feathered friends. Say hello to Love Litters. 100% kiln-dried wood, free from chemicals, and oh so kind to Mother Earth. No dust, no mess, and no toxins. Just a lightweight solution that's gentle on your wallet and even gentler in your home. Their biodegradable litter is crafted from wood destined for landfills, giving it a new purpose in your pet's life. Cats love it. Their astonishing formula works like magic to neutralize that notorious cat urine odor, keeping your home pine fresh and welcoming. For bird lovers, it zaps moisture from bird droppings, crumbling them away, all while being safe if pecked at or ingested. For reptiles and critters too, the mix is crafted to dilute the pine scent, ensuring those little lungs stay happy and healthy. Plus, every 30-pound bag of Love Litters will last up to 6 months, saving you some money. Transform your pet care routine today. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/litter. That's badlandsmedia.tv/litter, and breathe easy with a litter that loves your pet as much as you do. Look at that timing. That's impeccable. All right, man. JFK files. I know you read through them all. What do you think?
Yeah, every one of them. There was, what'd you call them? Postings or something? Entries.
Yep.
600 billion entries and 400 million jillion things in there. Yeah, I mean, I listened to some of your commentary. I don't think this is something. I think people are predisposed to either like doom or hopium out about deployments like this. I think you can have a pretty sober response by saying, in terms of people's wildest imaginations that got themselves all juiced up, thinking like, we're going to know who did it. The government's going to tell us. The CIA themselves are going to tell us exactly who did this. That was silly. We've been saying it was silly. Many people have been saying it was silly to think that. So if you rug pulled yourself, then you only have yourself to blame. I do not, however, blame Kash Patel or, anybody involved with this, including Trump of D-Class, for people feeling like they got rug pulled. These are the documents, right? And what is being released is, as far as we're aware anyway, is what the government chose to document and keep about whatever happened in 1963. And the very obvious thing is that if you're one of the most people who believe that government organizations or agencies had something to do with JFK's murder, those were the government agencies that were documenting everything that they were doing when JFK was murdered. And I think you said this on your Daily Show. Ezra Cohen Watnick, I believe, front ran this, and I give him a lot of credit for doing that because he told us, I think, two things. This is going to feel like a nothing burger if you're in that former group, but it's not a nothing burger. What's more important is, I think, people orbiting around some of the more macro, larger disclosures here, which is stuff that we've already known. But again, you said on your show, the CIA bad, and we know that. But maybe this is, I see this as Trump kind of getting that out there. The CIA is in worse standing in the public mind than they've ever been before. And I don't think this is necessarily where the JFK stuff stops. But I don't think we're going to get this sort of smoking gun thing. One more point on it is that I said this in our private chat earlier, I think in response to you or Zach or somebody. But the irony of this idea of a smoking gun with JFK is that if you polled 10 people at random in the Badlands audience about who did it, they would give you 10 different answers. And ironically, all 10 of them would probably be pretty close to the truth, because the truth probably is that JFK pissed off Israel, Zionists, the CIA, the FBI, the Bushes, Lyndon Johnson, organized crime, everybody who used to work with his father, right? Like, he pissed off all of them, Cubans, whoever you want to say. And they all either played some role in his demise, or they all consciously looked the other way after what happened to him. So there's not a smoking gun. All we need to know is what we already know, which is that the official narrative around the JFK assassination is absolute bullshit, and we know it's bullshit, and Trump knows it's bullshit. Everybody around it knows it's bullshit.
Yeah, so you pretty much nailed it. I want to show you guys this tweet from Ezra Cohen Watnick, just as a reminder or refresher. This is from back when it was the day before Trump's inauguration, January 19th. Charlie Kirk put out this post. Trump just said he will declassify all files related to the JFK assassination. One of two things will be true. The government killed JFK and covered it up and fought for decades to keep people from knowing the truth. Or number two, the files will tell us nothing and be incredibly boring and show that we overclassified documents to give unimpressive people unnecessary jobs with silly titles. Ezra responded, quote tweeted it, saying, having reviewed the so-called JFK files, I can tell you it's number two. Keep in mind the JFK files in quotes, because I'm going to come back to that. However, what we really need is an independent canvas for documents within the CIA and the IC related to the assassination to confirm that the documents the CIA turned over several decades ago are the whole story. Okay. The reason I think it's important he put JFK files in quotes is because, and this is something I'm not proud of. Okay. I am not proud of this fact, but I can honestly admit to you guys that I went through every single entry in the JFK files over the past 24 hours and opened every single one of them. I didn't read every single one of them because you can pretty quickly tell when something is like a nothing burger. Like here, for instance.
Yeah, right.
Okay, this is somebody who's employed. Like this is just the notes about some guy.
That's probably the one you skipped, and that's probably the one everyone skipped, and it probably said this is exactly what happened on that day.
No, that's the thing. You can tell the difference clearly between like, okay, so this is just a file on somebody, where he lives, all these things, contacts. I don't know if this is a subject or, I guess it says subject right there, or an asset, whatever. But then you look at something more like this, and these are the ones that are more interesting to me. These are the ones I actually read through. Psychological programs, Cuba, all these things. And there's this whole, lots of information in here that's a lot more interesting. Okay, so stuff like this, I'd be a little more interested to read. If you ever see the people pushing the narrative out there that there were redacted files still in there, that's true. For every redacted file they had like this, though, they had the original where it's unredacted. Okay, so keep that in mind. There were redacted parts put in there. They were uploaded, but the original version without the redactions is still in there too. And then this one. These are some of the longer ones, but there were, the Warren Commission, right? Everybody's familiar with what the Warren Commission was. They were looking into the assassination. There's some interesting interviews in here, and some of these I haven't posted yet. And the second part of Ezra, okay, sorry, I forgot the first part. I read through all the files, or looked at every file, opened every entry. If I had to put a number on it, I would say 95% of the files are either related to some foreign policy like Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis, or having to do with assets, like information about an asset they have somewhere, all these things. Right. There's maybe 5% of them that are even relatively interesting, okay, having to do with the assassination or the investigation of the assassination. So that's why JFK files in quotes, because a lot of it doesn't even have to do with JFK. but for some reason they were held back within the JFK, for whatever, the declassification stuff.
Yeah.
But so some of these interviews, and this is what I think when Ezra says in this tweet that we need to canvass for documents to confirm that the documents the CIA turned over several decades ago are the whole story. I haven't actually posted this on social media yet. I'm just going to show you guys live. I want to read this is part of the Warren Commission. This guy, Mr. Goldsmith, is talking to this agent, Mr. Shaw. And this is where I think a bulk of what Ezra's saying there comes into play. I just got to get to the right page. Okay. Or let's go right here. Mr. Goldsmith, do you have any reason to believe that Oswald may have been an agent of the KGB? Mr. Shaw says, I have no reason to believe it. How about an agent, asset, or source of the CIA? Oh, I'm not even sharing my screen. Sorry. Mr. Shaw, I would think that would be completely out of the question. Goldsmith goes on. For purposes of the record, could you explain why you think that would be out of the question? Because I think it would have come to light immediately had he any CIA connections. In what manner? Somebody would have revealed this fact. Like somebody from the CIA would have came forward and said, hey, the guy who just shot the president was part of the CIA, right? That's what this guy's agent is saying. Continued. Had he been an agent of the CIA, asset, or employee, is it possible that someone would have been able to cover that fact up? Mr. Shaw says, I do not think anyone could have covered up. Mr. Goldsmith, why not? Had he been an agent, then it would have been on the record somewhere. Is it possible that the record could have been erased or purged in some way? Mr. Shaw, I seriously doubt it. Mr. Goldsmith, could you give a reason? Just my belief in the integrity of the organization. It stands on that and the people in it. Does the agency, to your knowledge, have any safeguards to prevent records from being erased or purged? Nowadays, of course, we have laws, all these things. So there's 2 or 3 depositions from this Mr. Goldsmith with 2 or 3 different agents, all from around the time. And in at least a part of each of these depositions or questionings or whatever, transcripts, this Mr. Goldsmith guy is talking about files. Like there was a 201 personnel file created on Oswald within the CIA. You only do that if they're an asset, apparently.
Yeah, right.
And they don't have evidence that was there, but they have evidence of somebody requesting info from a 201 file. So it's like, why would they request something from a 201 file if that 201 file never existed because the CIA didn't have them as an asset? And that's where I think, like, if I ever take the time to go through this all again, I don't know. I'm going to dig a little deeper on some of these, but that's what I think Ezra's getting to, and that's what I think happened. I think Oswald was an agent. I think they killed him and they buried it. They didn't want any association with him. It could have been Israel. It could have been all these other things. I have no idea. That's my running theory based on reading through what I read through. The other aspect of these files that became really clear right away is how dirty our CIA really is. And they have their hands in the cookie jars all over the world. They are overthrowing regimes. They have assets everywhere. You name an American business that has a location overseas, CIA employees are part of that organization. They're in church groups. They're in NGOs. They fund NGOs. Their hands are so dirty. And that's what this really revealed to me is I didn't even realize the scope. Like being in this, thinking about it, like, oh, there's probably assets on social media opping us all the time, whatever. There are, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the big takeaway. If I want to, it's actually interesting when you bring up that sort of addendum to the Ezra tweet, because when he is talking about those canvassing for documents, it is interesting a guy in his position would put that out there. Because if I want to go back to the hopium angle, if we ever got a Moab about JFK, again, I don't think it would ever be... I don't think no matter what documents were ever destroyed or anything like that, that they documented what the deep state plan was to destroy JFK, right? To kill JFK. But you bring up a good point about somebody like Oswald. There were likely documents that the criminals, even tangentially involved in the operation, would not know could potentially incriminate them at the time. So, and this is where compartmentalization comes into things. It's highly unlikely that whoever was involved in the JFK assassination, or rather, it's highly unlikely that everybody who played a role in the assassination knows that they played a role in the assassination, right? You just brought up an example about a certain form that you would need, as a paper trail to, make somebody an asset, codify them as an asset, whatever, right? The person who puts that form together or conducts the interview may have no idea, and probably has no idea, what that specific asset is even tasked with doing, right? There are so many layers of compartmentalization here that so many of the people involved, even in the CIA at the time, probably had no idea what was going on. And I'm not just saying that because I believe in the integrity of the CIA. I'm saying it because the whole organization is built on compartmentalization, right? They perfected compartmentalization. And furthermore, it's just common sense. If you're the deep state of the day, let's say Bush Sr., etc., and you're putting this operation together, by definition, you would need as few people in the know as possible to run an op like this. While you need a lot of people technically involved in the op, most of them have no idea what they're doing, right? Most of the law enforcement responding to the assassination, most of the intel agents responding to the assassination and investigating the assassination in the aftermath probably were genuinely, earnestly investigating investigating what happened, not knowing that some of their higher ups were involved in what was going on. And this is where we get it. This is where we get into all the conspiracy theories about wet works, looking at, how many investigators died in the aftermath of this. That's one of the smoking guns always. But if Ezra's putting that out there, it's possible to humor the thought that if the plan's been going on a long time, somebody that precedes the Trump administration in this intel group or in these sort of military ops does have some of this documentation that hasn't been logged into government files, or that maybe the CIA thinks they got rid of, right? Yeah. And maybe they didn't get rid of all of it, just like it makes me think of the Tesla documents. Like, some of those documents were ordered to be destroyed. But were they all destroyed? We don't know. We know that John Trump took them into his possession. How many did he take? So I think you can play that game. But the larger point is what you're making. We don't need to have the criminals admit to us their criminality, just like we don't need the criminals to admit to us that they stole the 2020 election. We know they did, right? And I think with the CIA, the timing of it, and I did see enough people talking about this that I thought was encouraging, the timing of all of this stuff resurfacing with JFK, Trump is resurfacing John F. Kennedy and that whole era into the public mind for a reason. And I don't think it's about JFK. I think it's about all of the moves that Intel has made against Trump and against MAGA and against this whole movement. And it's even involved with all the stuff with Russia and Ukraine. Like, it's all the same storylines from the 60s replaying right now.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where and if Trump decides to take the JFK files narrative, because they were dropped yesterday. Like, hey, let's get the full truth out there. And then all I'm seeing on social media are like a couple accounts running like, oh, they would redacted the Israeli stuff. And that's another thing. I haven't gone through every single entry, opened every single file, not proud of it, but I did it. I only came across the Israel stuff maybe twice. And one of them was in like the days after Lincoln's assassination. I can even show you guys. He was killed on what, the 23rd?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had a series of these presidential daily briefings, or they call them the president's intelligence checklist. So this is what the president would get from all the agencies about certain hot topics around the world. This is on the 28th. And this is one of like the more interesting mentions of Israel. So shortly after he's assassinated, they now have reason to believe that the Israelis are developing a surface-to-surface missile of their own. Something that it's been publicized. I know we talked about on the basis conspiracies. I had to get a refresher from Zach on this, but JFK was anti-Israel getting missiles and nukes and whatnot. But here they're developing their own. They talked about it and whatnot. But there wasn't much other mentions of Israel that I found. So I'm wondering if some of those were even in the report, because nobody's providing a link so we can go look and see where they found it. Shoot, where was I going with that? Oh, wanting to see where Trump is going to take it, because is Trump going to come out and set a narrative of, oh man, these JFK files are devastating for the CIA. Look what they were doing all over the world. Like, what is he going to point out? Is he going to point
or is
out?
he going to say what we both just talked about with Ezra? in a craziest case scenario, he could come out and say like, that's actually not, they could kind of do a rerun of the Epstein thing where we got the whole binders deployment, right? But I mean in a good way, where we got the whole binders deployment, but then we get a follow-up where they're like, that's not everything, give us everything. But if it's coming from Trump, it's way more signal than if it's coming from anybody around him. So
for sure,
it'll be interesting to see. But it's not to doom out on any of this. I think from my perspective, I wrote an article 2 years ago called Temporal Trump Card, and it wasn't predicting necessarily the JFK files, but it was all about Trump conflating his journey in the American mind with that of John F. Kennedy. And, last year, revisiting the Cuban Missile Crisis. Chris and I did a Story Hour episode around it. Abs and I did an episode of The Narrative all about it. And it's incredible. Besides the assassination, the parallels are incredible to the modern day, especially when it comes to something else we might get to tonight, which is like back channels with Russia. You had Nikita Khrushchev and John F. Kennedy. You had Robert Kennedy. Now you've got Robert Kennedy Jr. in Trump's administration. Like, Trump has leaned fully into the analogs between his administration and Kennedy's administration, up to and including like leaning into the fact that somebody wanted to kill Trump, obviously, that didn't like the job he's doing, all the way into that. And I think besides the assassination and the intel agencies, the geopolitical environment is almost identical. You've clearly got the CIA and globalists and the EU, the system, in other words, trying to do everything in their power to keep the US and Russia at each other's throats, or at the very least separated. And it's what Trump is leaning into doing the opposite of, which is exactly what JFK was doing. It was him and Khrushchev trying to navigate the system that was trying to get them into war with each other at all costs.
Well, even in
that's the why.
In the immediate aftermath of the assassination, like one of their biggest, investigative leads into Oswald was a KGB asset. Like they were trying to get to pin this on Russia, call him a defector, all these things, but it didn't end up playing out that way. But when you said, we're not blackpilling on this, I don't feel like it's possible for me to ever blackpill, because I feel like I do a pretty good job myself personally of setting realistic expectations. Like I've said for a year now, or however long we knew these files were going to come out, that they are not going to give us the evidence that their agency, our own government, killed JFK. Like that's not going to be in the files they give us. They're going to give us as little as possible. If you expected that to be something else, that's your own fault for not having realistic expectations. And if you set realistic expectations, they can't let you down. That's standing off the rug and just watching the rug instead of standing on it. I only dip my toe on the rug every now and then when the spending bills come around and the debt ceiling vote.
Right? If you know you're on the rug, it can be fun. It's just about
especially
understanding.
When there's like shag rugs, those are
exactly.
Those are great. Some people lived in like rugged houses, rug walls, rug floors, rug ceilings, everything. That's not us.
Maybe that's something else we'll bring back from the Kennedy era. Just rugs everywhere. We're just gonna put rugs on the walls, rugs on the ceilings. We're gonna bring back those death trap hazards in people's houses where you've got the step down like hangout. What are those called? Somebody in the chat's gonna know. Somebody's got one in their house. One person in our audience has one.
Probably.
Like those dirty pits of just shag rug where you get down in that pit and somebody breaks a leg.
I can feel like a rash developing on my body just thinking about
Austin Powers kind of pit.
Yeah.
Down in there.
No, G Money, if he ends up being right about Bitcoin, he should buy a house and cover it in rugs. That'd be so funny.
Oh my God.
Shade rugs. But the JFK stuff, there's a couple files I'm going to post publicly. I would encourage you guys to actually read through just to get a good idea of like how bad the CIA was. I'll just show you a few here. A few more. Let me just get to them.
I don't know if you need to convince this audience how bad the CIA is, but
I know, but this is stuff that this is stuff that, we say the CIA is bad. You tell your friends the CIA is bad. You say all these things, but then your friends are like, oh, whatever. No, they're not. They're just protecting us. But then like, okay, well, did you know that back in the 60s, the CIA was talking about burning crops to overthrow a leader? This is something they wanted redacted. The group then, it's blurry enough the way it is. I need to put my glasses on. The group then turned to a discussion of number 32, agricultural sabotage. General Carter emphasized the extreme sensitivity of any such operation and the disastrous results that would flow from something going wrong, particularly if there were obvious attribution to the U.S. He went on to say, however, that it would be possible to accomplish this purpose by methods more subtle than those indicated on the paper. He mentioned specifically the possibility of producing crop failures by the introduction of biological agents which would appear to be of natural origin. Kind of sounds a lot like COVID, right? Natural origin, came from a wet market, whatever. Definitely didn't come from a lab. Mr. Bundy said that he had no worries about any such sabotage, which could clearly be made to appear as the result of local Cuban disaffection or of a natural disaster, but that we must avoid external activities such as release of chemicals, etc., unless they could be completely covered up. This is our own CIA trying to figure out a way to upset the population of a country so that they would overthrow a leader. There's documents in here where they fund paramilitary groups. They embed leadership into the paramilitary groups. It's so bad, guys. Like the CIA is so bad, and this is the 60s. Imagine how far it's come. It's come so far that they are willing to do it to the president here.
Right.
Like Trump in 2020.
And I could see what's going. I've kind of been using the term like timeline unification is what I see going on a macro with Trump and Kennedy on many different levels. But if we get retroactive disclosure of John F. Kennedy, and by that I mean if your normal everyday American doesn't just theorize what happened to Kennedy, but somehow in the next few years knows what happened to Kennedy, I don't think it's going to come by way of a document. I don't think the criminals documented their crimes in that way, right? We both agree on that. But here's what I could see. When you're talking about how bad the CIA has gotten, that's been a big storyline in this community for the last couple of years, specifically as it relates to Nord Stream 2 and even going back a little further, the Maidan coup in Ukraine. Now, what's going on in the public narrative right now? Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, according to the normie layers, are starting to flirt with each other and come back to the table. And, they're already talking about joint economic projects and cooperation in the future, right? But right now, it's all about this peace deal, supposedly, with Ukraine. I think it's possible that what comes out of this very public unification with Russia is intelligence sharing. I think this is going to be the public story. Intelligence sharing by the Russians to the Trump administration about what the CIA has been doing over the last few years, right? Because if you're Trump and you want public mandate, like normie public mandate, to not just make peace with Russia, but to move into like a very cooperative future with Russia, you got to reverse engineer a lot of damage, right? Yeah. So how do you do that? Maybe you disclose to the American people, you get on there and you do a White House press conference and say, we have proof that our own intelligence agencies under the Biden administration orchestrated the Nord Stream 2 attack in order to get us into war with Russia. And the Russians have provided intelligence to us, and we are cooperating in a joint investigation on U.S. intelligence agencies. This would all coincide with Donald Trump already trying to decrease the CIA and everything that he's doing right now. So if we get JFK disclosure, I think it could kind of come ironically through the present day. And then all the American people need to do is reverse engineer that backwards and be like, wait, so they tried to maybe kill Trump. They tried to get us into war with Putin. The Russians provided Trump with intelligence that the CIA was doing this. This is literally all a rerun of 1961, 1962.
Do you think we're actually going to get JFK disclosure, though? Because I think the disclosure is
not
the
direct.
Lack of disclosure and the disclosure of the CIA like covering stuff up. I did find that other entry I want to show you real quick to show you what I'm talking about in terms of I think they know there's a file that got destroyed. This is the other transcript where this is somebody like writing down their notes of an interview they did with somebody. I showed Kassassin, whoever that is, the personality 201 file request form from Oswald's 201 file. He said he had never seen it before and did not know there actually existed a 201 file on Oswald. Referring to the source of the form, he said it could have been like NSA or military and stuff. But this is what I'm talking about. Like there was a request for information from an Oswald file, but people say they didn't know there was one that even existed. And I'm convinced that he was, based on this, he was an asset of some U.S. intelligence agency and his file was destroyed. And they tried to paint it as if he was just KGB. maybe double agent or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
the disclosure I think that we're going to get, I don't think we're ever going to know who actually killed JFK. They're never going to admit to it. But I think we're going to get disclosure of the lengths the CIA potentially went to cover up their own involvement, whether there was proof of them involved directly or not, who knows. But that's what I think people get on board with in terms of, like the awakening, right? The normies, that even though people don't like that term, we keep giving them this excuse of, the normies aren't ready for it. The normies aren't ready for it. And so we got to do this slow. That's why we're not getting anything now. This is just step one. I understand that. But at the same, whatever we're going to get, I think we need to get the Band-Aid ripped off ASAP. Yeah. And if we're not going to get anything, then just say it, man. Like I'm growing impatient of the lack of transparency, to be honest.
Yeah. That's why, though, I actually fully agree with what you just said about what form disclosure would take. I don't know if I use this term tonight, but what I've been saying is de facto disclosure. Like that, I totally agree with you that it's the cover-up. It would be disclosure and evidence of a cover-up. It wouldn't be active evidence. It would be gravitational evidence. And the white pill on it for me is that if I'm looking for why would there be a retarded, and when I say that I mean timeline-wise, why would there be a retarded rollout of this, of the JFK stuff? If I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, which I will, it's not about the normies. Because I agree with you. If it's about the normies, I don't like that reasoning. Like, oh, they're not ready to understand who. Everybody and their grandmother literally is ready for JFK disclosure.
And even if they're not, if we're waiting for every normie possible to wake up, we're going to be waiting forever, because there's no way
I agree with that.
Everybody.
But I think if it's reverse engineered, if the reason is that they're laying out context through the Russian situation, and that's what gets them into the CIA, I think it will imprint much better. Just like a separate topic, but with the CIA and disclosure, etc. I think that disclosure of the COVID era is not really about the COVID era. It's about how many times they've done this in the past. But I think that disclosure would begin with the COVID stuff because it's so present. So if you're going to try to dismantle or get the public mandate to dismantle the CIA, if you're Donald Trump, ironically, I don't think disclosure of JFK does that with modern Americans, because a lot of them would be able to be like, well, that was them in the 60s. So what do? You destroy the CIA's reputation circa 2025 by saying this is what they're doing in the last 5 years. Now let's go back to what they did before.
Yeah, we got a comment in the chat here from B Torgo, and this is the kind of background information that we live for here at Badlands. Mr. Shaw, name is Clay Shaw. He was a gay guy from New Orleans. His job was to recruit gays to work for the CIA. I would wait. I feel like he did a pretty good job. I feel like there's a good amount of gay CIA agents based on the bullshit they've pulled on us the last few years.
I did find the stuff, the thingy. So this is what we're bringing back. So these are called conversation pits.
That's really what they call them?
Yeah, you walk through. If you make it through without breaking your ankle or something, you will have all the STDs. So you might as well just stay in there and hang out, do your thing. Because
is that the only place in the house you're allowed to have a conversation?
Yep. That's how it works,
Wow.
I think. I wasn't in the 70s, but I think this is how it worked. I think this is what, this is probably where I was conceived, something like this. We got sort of like a retro future style one here. Looks like they were trying a little too hard in this one, trying to make it look like Saudi Arabia or something.
Did somebody send you these, or did you look these up?
No, I looked these up. That's how good I am. And this one is depressing. Just something about it. Like, that's the kind of carpet that I just can't believe that people ever weren't depressed looking at a carpet like that.
The ketchup and mustard colors.
Just dirty brown carpet. I don't know, but
you know my favorite thing to do is when I play piano, watch some TV while I'm playing it.
Crawl down into a pit before you do.
Yeah, get in a pit, play some piano, turn on the old big TV that only gets a channel or two.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I like to do.
What we got going on here?
This is crazy.
What's this, like a a 9-inch. And some, I don't know what this person was doing.
Lots of drugs.
Tea set or like Japanese sake? Some sake going on? That would be a 70s thing.
Isn't it sake?
Got the yoga going on?
Is it sake or sake?
Sake.
I think it's no.
As,
you mean the local American Chinese man at my local sushi restaurant has been saying it wrong all these
Japanese.
Years? Whatever.
You racist. Wow.
Whatever, man.
Anyway, we're bringing conversation pits back and STDs, and they may or may not be related.
This conversation has gone down a pit.
I just bet if you overlaid STD rates in the United States with the preponderance of, that's not the right word, but the ubiquity of conversation pits.
Hey, the chat says I'm right.
Just saying.
Sake. It's not sake.
Okay, well, I'm right that it's Japanese, not Chinese. So we're both racist.
That's cool. But you also watch random people walking around Japan in your free time. So
yeah, I got out of that phase. That was like a 2-week phase.
What do you watch now then? Just trying to think of a better, more believable story.
Whatever YouTube decides to play at 2 in the morning.
You're so full of shit. That's funny. But I'm right. Chad agrees with me. Thank you, everybody. We should bring back that style. You know, they say everything comes back in style eventually, right? So right. I bet 10 years from now, people will have STD pits again.
Yeah. We could do it at a GART, just like.
I've been saying we need a ball pit for anytime somebody has a bad question or idea, they get thrown in the ball pit.
Right. Get in the conversation pit. Get in the rug pit with G Money. That's your sentence.
There we go.
Like you have to go argue on behalf of XRP
against
to G Money.
You have to try
a conversation pit.
You cannot leave the pit until you convince G Money to pay his taxes.
Yep.
Be in there forever. It's so funny. All right, man. Let's maybe go to the next subject. Unless there's anything else about the JFK files. I think there's going to be another drop. I believe they said there's like 80,000 documents. We've only gotten 63,400 to this point. So I'm expecting another, I don't know, 17,000 documents, but we'll see if we actually get them. But yeah. And notice nobody's talking about the Epstein files since these dropped.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about the space people landing in the ocean after 9 months.
Man. What a
That's what these are about. They want to distract from the safe return of 9 astronauts. Can you imagine, like back in the 60s when we were told we went to the moon, if they were like, yeah, in the future, there's going to be 2 astronauts stranded in space for 9 months. And when they returned, literally nobody would care. Because I feel like nobody cared.
I mean, I am flat Earth agnostic, but it is very silly to believe the 1960s moon landings in the context of, now I'm not saying that we didn't go to the moon. I don't know. I am saying that the footage of us having gone there is an IQ test at this stage, and the stories about how we can't get back despite NASA promoting themselves as having done it with less technology than is in the pocket of an average 12-year-old in 2025. It is very, very silly to believe that stuff. And maybe I'll pick this for next week's Story Hour. But a movie, 2024 movie with Scarlett Johansson and Channing Tatum, Fly Me to the Moon.
I couldn't even get into that. I didn't think it was that good.
It's boring. No, it's not a good movie. But what I found crazy about it is it's just an on-the-nose, like in-your-face disclosure of actual son of CIA asset Woody Harrelson playing a CIA asset in Fly Me to the Moon, who is literally handling the project while filming a fake moon landing. Like,
that's also stupid.
I mean, they are pretty much telling you at this point, like, guys, we're telling you, we're making movies about it. And I don't know.
It's just silly. Like, we went to the moon, landed successfully, allegedly, had people walk on the moon, somehow returned back to the spaceship, and were able to return back to Earth. Everybody survived, all good. And then in 2024, we can't get people out of a space station for 9 months. Like it's just it doesn't add up. And I've been saying, I'm going to
Yeah.
keep saying that because it's just a ridiculous story.
Right.
And also the footage from them coming back to Earth, like I'm no expert, but it looked very AI.
It looks
like,
fake.
It just looks fake.
Yep.
But whatever.
Tangential to this little subtopic is I think it's pretty interesting that Trump is highlighting the arson attacks on the Tesla vehicles, etc. Specifically that he is referring to them as domestic terrorism. And one step further, he's saying that he thinks they're being funded. And, we talk about narrative deployments. We talk about tonight, the theme of the show has become methods of disclosure and how do you disclose things. Well, that'd be a hell of a way to disclose it. That's a super normie mimetic deployment right now, is the narrative. The idea that these far lefties are freaking out about Teslas. Now, most of them, what Trump is hinting to Normieville is that these are not deranged lunatic leftists that are just getting emotional about Teslas. The ones who are firebombing them are being paid by somebody to do it. And that'd be a hell of a way to disclose funding of domestic terrorism.
Yeah. That's a great point. Thanks, man. I mean, it wasn't that great.
Yeah.
Don't let it get to your head. Let's go to the next topic. Obviously, the show, the Devolution Power Hour, it was created to discuss the Devolution series stuff. And anytime something relevant to that comes up, we got to talk about it. And I would say the last major development that we've had was back on January 19th when Joe Biden issued that partial revocation of Executive Order 13961. It almost appeared that he also issued a new national continuity policy, security memorandum, and now it's like confirmed in this that's what he did. And so I don't know what that means.
Pen did.
What?
His pen did.
The auto pen did. Yes. Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar, Executive Order 13961, one of the more important, articles in the series, in my opinion, talks about this executive order that Trump did where he, let me get to it. Here we go. Using his wartime authority, essentially, established a committee that was responsible for executing and implementing a continuity government plan. And it's very detailed out. I'd encourage you to go read it if you haven't, if you're new to the show or Devolution generally. Along with this, he issued this federal mission resilience strategy. Okay. And this is what we're going to be going back and forth with to the new thing that just came out, because this new executive order is pretty much right on the nose. Achieving efficiency through state and local preparedness. And I think we're going to have a lot of little discussion points off of this. So I'm going to read something, and then we'll talk about it, and we'll just kind of go through. So if you have any comments you want to add.
Old school Devo digs.
Kind of. It feels like that.
Yep.
Yeah. I haven't been this excited about executive order in a while, though. So
get in your conversation pit if you got one, people.
We need a separate pit for watching Rumble shows, though.
Yeah.
The conversation pit is just for conversations. So the purpose of this: common sense approaches and investments by state and local governments across American infrastructure will enhance national security and create. You know what? I think I'm doing this backwards. I think I should read. I'm gonna read this first. The Federal Mission Resilience Strategy from December 7th of 2020. I'm just gonna read the intro letter from Trump, and then we can compare it to what just came out today. Which, by the way, if you go and look for the FMR strategy, the one from 2020, it's no longer up on the website. It's not even out there anymore because they're reviewing it. Apparently, the site is under review until. So I had to go to the Wayback Machine to get it, which I thought was interesting. But okay, let's do the letter. Federal Executive Branch. In support of my administration's national security strategy, I'm issuing the Federal Mission Resilience Strategy, hereafter the strategy, to address the long-term challenges of political, economic, and military competition from near-peer adversaries, as well as disruptions from natural disasters and pandemics. Our adversaries will not attempt to fight us on our terms. They have studied our way of war, invested in capabilities to target our strengths, and are adept at competing below the threshold of armed conflict. It's like a regular warfare, guys.
Yeah.
Adversarial threats are not the only source of disruption. Disruptions from wildfires, natural disasters, and pandemics such as COVID-19 pandemic highlight the importance of an integrated risk management approach to prioritize essential functions and services. This strategy
all of which became a huge theme during that administration to come.
Yeah, for sure. This strategy accelerates our collective efforts to fully implement national continuity policy and make risk-informed decisions to maintain a comprehensive and effective capability that ensures the continuous performance of essential functions and services to preserve our constitutional form of government under any and all conditions. So the two things there I want you to remember is the risk-informed decisions part and any and all conditions. It's almost like all hazards, but they just say any and all conditions. So keep that in mind, because the new one says some similar things. As the executive branch, we must recommit and sustain leadership's attention on meeting the needs of the American people in the face of disruptions and preserving our form of government. Despite our best efforts, the government cannot prevent all dangers. We recognize and must prepare for the possibility of unforeseen events, including natural disasters, pandemics, cyber threats, and kinetic or electromagnetic pulse attacks. We must be prepared as a nation, as a federal government, and as individual citizens to preserve, protect, and defend our way of life. This strategy builds on the national continuity policy and provides guidance to the executive office of the president and federal executive departments and agencies to increase the executive branch's resilience. Our current and future prosperity depend on our ability to reduce the vulnerability of our critical infrastructure to cyber, physical, and electromagnetic attack. The government and private sector must work together to reduce vulnerabilities and design infrastructure that addresses preparedness and resilience from the start. The follow-on federal mission resilience implementation plan will ensure that our nation's efforts and resources will be brought to bear in a coordinated manner through integrated continuity of operations and continuity government programs interwoven into routine day-to-day government operations. Working together, we will prioritize the security, prosperity, and interests of the American people to confront the challenges of tomorrow. I don't think I said a single word wrong there, that entire thing.
That was pretty good.
And I just say vulnerability like 3 times.
Hooked on phonics.
This is progress, guys. This is what progress looks like right here. This is it. Okay, so that was the old one, and there's a whole, bunch that's to it, but we're not going to get into any of that. Now we'll go to the new one, and I think it's your turn to read. At least this first paragraph. Give me a chance to sit.
Can we get a zoom, a 1x zoom? I don't know.
Can you read the whole thing?
All right. Section 1, purpose. Common sense approaches and investments by state and local governments across American infrastructure will enhance national security and create a more resilient nation. Federal policy must rightly recognize that preparedness is most effectively owned and managed at the state, local, and even individual levels, supported by a competent, accessible, and efficient federal government. Citizens are the immediate beneficiaries of sound local decisions and investments designed to address risks, including cyber attacks, wildfires, hurricanes, and space weather. When states are empowered to make smart infrastructure choices, taxpayers benefit. This order empowers state, local, and individual preparedness and injects common sense into infrastructure prioritization and strategic investments through risk-informed decisions that make our infrastructure, communities, and economy resilient to global and dynamic threats and hazards.
Okay, so chat, we need to know who read better so we know who should continue reading. But yeah, so this is just the groundwork, the purpose of it. They want to empower the more local level. And one of the themes with this new executive order here, I think back to the devolution sandwich, like the local action, national impact. The government does their thing from the top down, but we the people, it's all about giving the government back to we the people. That's like a common thread throughout all this. And obviously space weather. I mean, we should all be concerned about that too, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad they definitely included that here.
There's maybe, I don't know if it's more relevant at a section to come, but this section also includes it. To your point about the devolution sandwich, there's a few points in this where that are very encouraging, I think, to a lot of the stuff we talk about. And that is, you mentioned in the last segment transparency, and it's something that we call for all the time. And we can understand why a continuity of government covert operation was necessary and be adults and understand why all of that happened. Quoting Rich Higgins, because of the battle space that we were involved in, right? But if said operations, if said operations were necessary, then, or put another way, if they were successful, then the idea would be that we are moving into a future where those operations are no longer necessary. And if those operations are no longer necessary, I think we would also need to move into a future where they're basically not possible. Because, quoting JFK, the very word secrecy is repugnant to a free and open society. And we can understand why secrecy has been necessary during this period in time, while also believing that it needs to end. That's why I think that's to me the through line of what is so encouraging about even how they open this up.
Yeah, you're right, and you probably got a little ahead of it, but it's something that's worth discussing.
There's more to it, yeah.
Yeah, we can discuss it now though, because I think you're absolutely right. Like what we went through these last 4 years with the devolution stuff, arguably unconstitutional, maybe. Like, we've had this discussion too. It's totally unconstitutional. There's no way Trump would have done something like that. Blah blah blah. He's not president. All these things. But it's like, is it more unconstitutional for somebody to steal an election and just be allowed to walk in there with all the corrupt ties that they have? I would argue no. It's more constitutional for a duly elected president to use his authority and powers to put up guardrails while he steps away and tries to win people over through the awakening. That's my take on it. Mm-hmm. But something like this, in order for it to never happen again, you would need to. There's so many things that would need to happen. You'd have to expose the reason why it happened. You'd have to fix our elections to prevent it from ever happening again. You'd have to prove that they were stolen in the first place. You have to expose the media and their lies. Like, there's so many layers that would need to be exposed so people understand why it had to happen in the first place, and then understand what needs to be fixed so it doesn't happen again. And if I'm being totally honest, based on the pace we're on right now, I do not see us getting that disclosure of. I've said forever, we're not going to get disclosure of what we went through with the devolution op. I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to see it in my lifetime.
I agree with that, but I think ironically it's similar to the JFK conversation. The choice to know will be yours type of feeling. That the gravity will be there. I mean, you figured it out, or we think you figured it out in this era. But more to the point of why I find this encouraging is, let's say you're right. Let's say we don't get disclosure of the devolution operation. I can accept that, actually, as strange as it is, if we are moving into a future where the communication and transparency layers between the government and the people are such that something like this could never be implemented in the future by anyone. Because to me, it's almost the same thing. Like, yeah, you're not disclosing what already happened, but we're mature enough to acknowledge that it was necessary in that battle space. We're also probably mature enough to understand that we're in this community mature enough to understand why it was necessary, and that a lot of people are not, but that it can't happen again in the future. The reason I reverse engineer this, and I'll put the question to you. Besides wanting to know, why would you want disclosure about this specific thing? And I would say it's because you don't want it. You don't want government secrecy to be possible in the future from the American people. So if we end up in that stage anyway, then it's not really necessary.
There's a lot of layers to that question too. But yeah, obviously I want there to be 100% government transparency at all times. I know we're never going to get that, but that's my constitutional wet dream, if you will. But when it comes to this and this executive order and what Trump is laying out and like educating people and empowering the state and local and individual level, their role in preparedness and all these things. If our government wasn't so big and bloated and had so much, so much bullshit attached to it, and all these executive agencies, all these employees, and all the spend, it just becomes so unconstitutional from the original form that was intended.
Yeah. That
realistically, what we went through, if we had an actual form of government that our Constitution outlined, and we somehow had a stolen election, and you wouldn't need a devolution operation, because the states, they shouldn't have to rely on the federal government in order for there to be like protections in place to protect the United States from the government, because that's essentially 100%. What the devolution operation was. And that's why this executive order is encouraging to me, is because it's like, we are going to show you the actual role of you guys in some sort of continuity situation and how you guys are supposed to be the ones doing this, and it shouldn't be dependent upon us at the federal level to take this all on. We're too big. Like that's kind of how I read this thing.
Totally agree with that. And I think the way I would put it is, you can almost look at this executive order as like a choice to know acknowledgement to those with the ears to hear it, that the people we call patriots and white hats, they're essentially acknowledging that what we've been watching over this period of time is an unconstitutional but moral administration battling an unconstitutional evil administration.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And neither of them is constitutional, right? But the projected, and I'm not saying like we theorize it's projected, Donald Trump's projected endgame of his era of American politics is to return power back to the people. The Trump administration and Trump 1.0 didn't function that way.
I think we're having this conversation almost prematurely because they outline that, and you guys will see what we're talking about when we get through this. It is the policy of the United States that state and local governments and individuals play a more active and significant role in national resilience and preparedness, thereby saving American lives, securing American livelihoods, reducing taxpayer burdens through efficiency, and unleashing our collective prosperity. So right there, local activation. It's what we're doing at these GARTs, guys, building that community, local action, national impact. He says it right here. In addition, it is the policy of the United States that my administration streamline its preparedness operations, update relevant government policies to reduce complexity and better protect and serve Americans, and enable state and local governments to better understand, plan for, and ultimately address the needs of their citizens. Again, local level, giving the government back to we the people means less of the responsibility for any of this stuff is with the federal government. It's with the states and the local communities. Section 3, updating federal policy to save lives and end the subsidization of mismanagement. It's so embarrassing.
It's a weird word. I'll give you a pass on that word.
Yeah, it's those weird words that I read them 100 times, and every single time I will get them wrong. Is what it is. Anyway, so the APNSA, this is formerly Robert O'Brien's role, who was formerly the continuity coordinator under the 13961. He shall publish a national resilience strategy that articulates the priorities, means, and ways to advance the resilience of the nation. The national resilience strategy shall be reviewed and revised at least every 4 years or as appropriate. So within 90 days, we should get a new national resilience strategy. I'm curious to see how well it lines up with the one that we got in 2020. Because remember, what Biden kind of did is he issued a new national resilience strategy. He partially revoked sections of 13961. And so I wonder if they're just going to be like, hey, let's just go back to the one we had before, or if they're actually going to make it more, if they're actually going to activate and put it in the hands of the local communities. It'll be interesting to see.
I don't want to keep getting ahead of it, but I think that Kash Patel commentary that we've talked about on the show over the last year is giving us a hint as to the latter.
Could be. Remind me to bring that up. I'll find that clip.
Yeah, I'll write a note on that. Yeah.
So also the APNSA again with the director of Office of Science and Technology Policy, who was involved in Executive Order 13961. They shall review all critical infrastructure policies and recommend to the president the revisions, rescissions, and replacements necessary to achieve a more resilient posture, shift from an all hazards approach to a risk-informed approach. And that's the part that I think is notable, because we go back to this one, the one from 2020, they say risk-informed decisions right here.
Yeah.
But then, I need to get these two next to each other so I don't have to go. And then shift from an all hazards approach to risk-informed. So this original one, they want to make risk-informed decisions, but they need to do it under any and all conditions, like all hazards. It's almost like both in this one. This one, it's both risk-informed during all hazards. The new one, they want to go away from all hazards to just risk-informed. I don't know.
So I got a little thing that the machine actually gave me when I was. I can't override your thing. Oh, I can. I have the power. Nice.
How dare you?
So the Grok actually gave me a nice little summary here, because I was keying in on the all hazards versus
you would use AI
informed. No, I think this is good because I think it's interesting to try to consider why the change. And to me, this is indicative of Patriots needed the broad authorities.
Oh, question. Did you put both of the documents into Grok and it spit this out?
No.
Or did you just ask?
No, I specifically asked a few different conversations, but this one was basically, I narrowed it into explain the differences between all hazards and risk informed in the context of government operations or military planning. So it was not about these documents in particular, but
And
just basically instances of this terminology being used.
Just to clarify, I do not trust AI because so far in my experience with AI, every single answer you get from AI is the regime answer. They always slant it towards what the regime wants you to understand. So
I feel like the context in the executive order sounds like this.
No, yeah, but I have to preface anything AI related because that's where I'm at with it right now. We're on a it loves me, but I hate it. Love-hate relationship with AI at the moment.
Right. For anybody listening, just as a brief overview, according to the AI definition, the all hazards approach is broad, covers all potential hazards. Risk informed is focused and prioritizes specific risks, which obviously John just said. And I think what's interesting about that is if we believe that patriots are the ones who've been using COG operations and these sorts of powers, constitutional or otherwise, it looks like they're narrowing that authority, where that's how I read it. Like they're saying, we needed an all hazards approach at the time because of the battle space we were operating in, but we acknowledge that the government having this broad all hazards definition to invoke continuity of government is probably not a good thing.
Yeah. You got to give a quick shout out to TamJ1116, whose husband is watching for the first time. Welcome to the show.
TamJ's husband. Maybe they're both sitting in a conversation pit.
Could be.
The kids are in bed.
Pit of despair.
Yep.
That's me. But welcome to the show. Hope you enjoy. Hope you guys can make it to a conference. But yeah, I think you're right. It's interesting, the shift from all hazards, which they needed because they didn't know what they were going to need to do during the Devo op, to looking forward, what it might be like. Anyway, for the purposes of, is that the spot I'm in? Yeah, for the purposes of this order, critical infrastructure policies, this is really interesting, do not include any policies related to purported misinformation, disinformation, or malinformation, nor so-called cognitive infrastructure, which should be reevaluated consistent with the policy set forth in EO 14149, restoring free speech and ending federal censorship. This to me is like
AKA propaganda.
No, this to me is election related because they use these to ban people during the election. Like this was misinformation, disinformation about the elections. That was all considered part of the election infrastructure. That's what CISA had a role in. So I feel like they're directly hitting on the election stuff with this, but also.
Do you mean from a censorship perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they were censoring people in the name of national security because people were spreading rumors about the elections.
Yeah.
Which they weren't rumors at all,
Right.
The election was
Another term I was looking up because I had never heard it in a government context is cognitive infrastructure, and it seems to be just how they generally refer to information and mass psychological systems, which is pretty fascinating. Like it's kind of, psychological warfare, I guess, which made me think of Trump's clip, the illegal psychological warfare operations. So they're accepting that. I can't say that's exactly.
Don't forget this persecution is being done by the same weaponized agencies that for 7 years have been running illegal psychological warfare campaigns against the American people, much as if they were.
Oh, I should have let that play on. But yeah, that's a great point too. That's a absolutely great point. So these are the policies recommended to be reviewed or modified based on critical infrastructure. They have Biden strengthening the security and resilience of United States food and agriculture, critical infrastructure security and resilience, America's supply chains, and White House Council on Supply Chain Resilience. So those will be reviewed, and we'll see if they get revoked later, who knows what. And now Section C, National Continuity Policy. Within 180 days of the date of this order, the APNSA, in coordination with the heads of relevant agencies, shall review all national continuity policies and recommend to the president the revisions, rescissions, and replacements necessary to modernize and streamline the approach to national continuity capabilities, formulate the methodology and architecture necessary to achieve an enduring readiness posture, and implement the national resilience strategy described in subsection A of the section, which again is to make it more reliant on the local communities and individual level. The policies that are going to be reviewed and recommended for modification as appropriate include EO 13618, which is the assignment of national security and emergency preparedness communication functions, The reason I think that's interesting is because that comes up in Devolution Part 13 right here. Trump made a change to this, essentially cutting the red tape. Obama's EO created a process for emergency communication involving all sorts of red tape through deep state agencies, and Trump shred that order to pieces and consolidated it into the hands of those implementing and executing the devolution plan. That was my summary of it from back in the day. But so that is brought up here.
It should be shredded.
Whatever.
Just tell me.
You said sake, so you don't get to criticize me tonight. You don't get to criticize me tonight. The biggie here, Executive Order 13961 of December 7th, 2020, Governance and Integration of Federal Mission Resilience. The way this is put in here, like they have this separately, okay, EO 13961. They also later include Biden's 14146, which partially revoked 13961. So they're looking at both of them, though. You know what I mean? I wonder if they're looking at this in its original form or after the revocation, because they included the revocation in here as well. They could have just included this one, right? Well, maybe, but they had them both in here. So I think that's notable. They also have National Security Memorandum 32, which this is Biden. This is what he issued the same day, which is National Continuity Policy. What they don't have in here is PPD 40, Presidential Policy Directive 40, which was our national continuity policy up until January 19th of 2025. Let me show you that here. In Executive Order 13961, the highlighted part here, in alignment with Presidential Policy Directive 40, PPD 40, which is National Continuity Policy, it appears Joe Biden actually did implement a new PPD 40, essentially, with this NSM 32, but we have no idea what's in there. We have no idea about any of it. So I just think it's so interesting. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like why that's interesting? Because we've been relying on PPD 40 for years as the national continuity policy. It's classified. We only get glimpses of what's in there based on other documents that are public, like the FEMA Federal Continuity Directives 1 and 2. And so if it's been replaced, do we get to see? I would love to see PPD 40 and see what's in there. I doubt it. But
just get shredded.
And then it'd be interesting to see because Trump's executive order, last thing. Trump's executive order 13961, it was a continuity plan, right? That was essentially implemented in there, or the outline of one, but it didn't actually replace PPD 40. All it did was make a couple alterations, but it relied on PPD 40 as the continuity policy. I feel like it could have replaced it, but instead it didn't. But now is he going to replace it with his own this time around?
Right.
It's just really interesting.
Yeah, all that's great. I mean, for me, there's the thread I just kept grabbing onto throughout this is anytime it's referencing communications in particular, just because I think it's so interesting to consider like the actual framework of continuity of government operations in the future compared to the communications framework around that. And that's what's super key and seems notable of why they're referencing communications. I mean, when they're talking about cognitive infrastructure, I think that they're referring, and the misinformation, et cetera, I think they're referring to what you said. You know, you can't use cog operations to combat, citizen speech, et cetera. You can't use that. But it also feels like they're talking about disclosure here. Like cog operations couldn't be implemented without certain communications with state, local, and, citizen transparency. It's not stated directly, but they keep bringing that up. And I don't think they're talking about internal communications necessarily.
It gets to a point here. We're getting there where they talk about kind of educating people on policy. And I think that, educating people on their function and role. I think that's a key point we're getting to. Review all national preparedness and response policies and recommend to the president revisions, all those things, and implement the national resilience strategy described in subsection A. And they talk about these other policies. This has to do with preparedness and response. Executive Order 12656, assignment of emergency preparedness responsibilities. Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5, management of domestic incidents. Presidential Policy Directive 8 of March 30th, 2001, national preparedness. Presidential Policy Directive 22 of 2013, which is national special security events, which reminds me of the inauguration. And then this one is probably the most interesting in this section. PPD 44 from November 7th of 2016, enhancing domestic incident response. The timing of that is very interesting. So when was the election of 2016? Was that November 3rd or 5th? Don't remember.
I don't remember.
You should look that up while I keep going. They have this national risk register. They're going to what?
The 8th.
Oh, the 8th. That's even crazier because it's the day before. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, anyway. They're developing a national risk register that identifies, articulates, and quantifies natural and malign risks to our national infrastructure, related systems, and their users. And then whatever is produced by the National Risk Register shall be used to inform the intelligence community, private sector investments, state investments, and federal budget priorities. And then finally, federal national functions constructs. Okay, so this is very relevant to stuff we've talked about for what seems like a decade now, but it's only been a few years. The federal government organizes national preparedness and continuity through the bureaucratic and complicated lens of overlapping and overbroad functions, in quotes, which include the national essential functions, primary mission essential functions, national critical functions, emergency support functions, recovery support functions, and community lifelines. One of the things that we used to always talk about with devolution is like, we don't know the full details. We can't even technically prove it was taking place, but there's like a lot of circumstantial evidence pointing to something. And the theory is like, okay, they implemented these guardrails to essentially protect the national essential functions. Those are like the red lines that whatever they are, they reprioritize them, reorganize them. There may only even have been one that was, just don't let us get nuked or invaded or whatever. Maybe that was the only one. We don't know. But we use the national essential functions a lot because those are like the main thread of any continuity of operations or continuity government policy or plan is you have to do your function to protect the primary and national essential functions. Like each function you do is some sort of, you're doing that to protect the main one. And so now they're talking about like how they overlap. They're too bureaucratic, overbroad. We need to streamline this a little bit. Within 1 year of the date of this order, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall propose changes to the policies outlining this framework and any implementing documents to ensure state and local governments and individuals have improved communications with federal officials and a better understanding of the federal role.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting because they want to educate and let people on the local level know what the federal government's role is supposed to be with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. In the event of some sort of threat to national essential functions, that's why it feels like again, almost de facto disclosure, going back to the JFK thing. Not saying right now, but as they roll this out, what form does that communication take? It feels like disclosure of the process anyway, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be like, hey, yeah, on December, whatever it is, 2020, we implemented this plan and we're looking for, retroactive approval from all the states that we did it. I don't think that's happening.
No.
But going forward, it feels to me like they're setting up a framework to say, listen, there might be times in the future, and there could have been times in the past where we could have used continuity of government operations. However, we, as the Trump administration federal government, strongly believe that the states need to be fully informed and involved with that decision, right? Doesn't that make sense? If you just cut out all the noise of executive orders, etc., the stated intentions of the Trump administration is to return us to something very close to our constitutional origins. And the constitutional origins are all about a convention of states that are granting the federal government their power. It's not that the federal government has separate power. Yeah. So how on earth could we be in a future American republic and claim to be constitutional if the federal government can do things that the state doesn't know they're doing?
Yeah, it's crazy.
They can't. So it feels like this is the choice to know will be yours thing, I think, where they're like, hey, in the future, if we ever do this thing that we've definitely not done in the recent past, you guys would need to sign off on it.
Yeah, I mean, think of what we kind of essentially believe took place in 2020. Trump saw the election was stolen. He had every reason to fight it. He had all the evidence, in my opinion, to prove that he won. He could have prevented Joe Biden from taking office, but he didn't. And he did so, I believe, to prevent a civil war, one, but also to like spark this awakening. And this is where we're at now. And things have so far appeared to be going according to whatever plan was put in place back then, right? But the things that would have been required, like the level of secrecy, the PEDs that are in place, who knows, presidential emergency action documents. Like if there was potentially a PED out there that was probably used at some point that said something along the lines of, okay, if a president is inaugurated or is going to be inaugurated because of by means of a stolen election and we decide to walk away, these are the things that take place. You protect the power grid, you monitor nuke stuff, you take over these communications, all these things, all by Joe Biden getting put in office. A whole bunch of things took place. Total speculation. But if the local states like saw that PED existed, how might they react to that? You know what I mean? Is that the level of education and exposure? It's like, this exists, but we never used it, promise. Or is it gonna be like, this existed and we never used it, but it's gonna be very obvious, like, okay, well, you definitely used that one. Now it makes sense, you know?
Right. Well, it also makes me think the way you just laid that out is it's not just, I think, on the federal disclosure side of the equation, but in the scenario you just laid out, which is the event of a stolen election, then what you would have is a fake president, which we endured, right? Yep. And another way of looking at this is the administration giving the states, giving the, what's the word I'm looking for? The non-conforming, non-complying states a constitutional framework through which to not comply, right? So we're thinking of this from a federal perspective because we think that's what went on. But going forward, they might not be talking about federal continuity of government.
I hope not.
Well, exactly. And what if what they're talking about here, with not just the communication, but the education, is, hey, 2028 rolls around, and 2/3 of the states believe that the election was stolen. Then do the states implement individual continuity of government operations to say, like, hey, we as Texas and Florida will not recognize this president, and we are acting in accordance with national and constitutional continuity of government operations to protect the national essential functions of our citizens of Texas against a Manchurian candidate.
I see what you're saying. See, I think if it gets to where it needs to get to, that shouldn't even be necessary. We fix our election system. We shouldn't have to worry about that stuff anymore.
That's true.
But this is a civics. Trump 2.0, this second administration so far has turned out to be a civics lesson. Like really, we're seeing Trump implement these executive orders, and he's almost testing the boundaries of his power. And he's getting, every time he does something, you have a judge, a Obama or Biden appointed judge stepping in and saying, no, you can't do that. And then it goes through the court system. We haven't really seen one get to the Supreme Court yet that's actually like been ruled upon, but we're getting there. We have to. It's a civics lesson on what is the presidential's authority. And right now it's also a civics lesson in what is the judicial branch's authority? How are they allowed to do this at all times? And then what is Congress? When are we going to get the civics lesson on Congress? Because I'm sure that's coming too. But then it's getting into everything here. It's getting into where's our civics lesson on what the government is allowed to do, the federal government, in the face of a national emergency. Because this is something that even before Trump walked away, even before the election, they were talking about Trump's powers, his COVID powers, his secret wartime powers, all these things.
Yeah.
And you could make some arguments, and I totally understand these arguments too, that some of those things are unconstitutional. There's leeway in act of war, times of war, president gets attacked. Thomas Massie totally got this wrong the other day, by the way, with that tweet that he put out there, where Trump can strike Iran without congressional approval. He just can't declare war on Iran. That's Congress's job.
By the way, Eric Carlson on the Badlands Substack put out a Jimmy's Wrestling Thomas Massie article yesterday.
How can you be in Congress for 13 years and not get a single bill put forth and passed through? Like, what are you doing? All you're doing is tweeting. Get off the phone, bro, and get a bill through.
Yep. It's we've told people it's all free. Badlands.substack.com. Massey Maximalist. It's a pretty good one. But yeah, no, it's absolutely a civics lesson, and especially with the judicial powers right now, I think that's the biggest one going on. Where it's and I am the encouraging thing here is that outside of the streams we do and the audience we talk to, I go on Zero Hedge, and they're a great aggregator, but I also use them as sort of this in between layer of. They're not quite InfoWar, but they're definitely not mainstream media. Like I think they're trying to figure shit out.
They're trying to sell gold. That's what they're trying to do. They sell a lot of gold.
Yeah.
Every article. But yeah, anyway.
But they've been talking about this a ton, right? Like, and all the people they cite, they're an aggregator. So the whole alt media is deep into that argument of judicial powers. So it is working in terms of the civic lessons, right? These civic lessons are designed, we think, to provoke this kind of sifting, this kind of public argument and public conversation. So I think we use the word constitutional so much when you're saying like it was Devo constitutional or not. I would say no. I agree with you that yes, there's gray area there, but I focus less on whether or not we can argue back and forth on whether it was constitutional, and more so that the hat they're hanging on is, was it moral? Was it right? And I think that we can argue that it was moral and right, and that is much more important than whether or not it was constitutional. Because as we've been saying, we said this at GART, many of the founding fathers did not agree with the final framework of the Constitution. So we need to get to it. Constitution can play a role here, but I'm not thinking about the Constitution as much as I'm thinking about, is our government moral, and is it acting in accordance with the wishes of us, right? That was the purpose of the Constitution, and it failed. So, we've talked about this before, but I just think it's a little bit secondary.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying. This comes back to what Abraham Lincoln did during the Civil War. Like, this is one of my articles too, talking about, should I let the Constitution fail, or should I use every available broader power inferred by the Constitution to protect it?
Right.
Like, is it right to lose a limb to save the body, or should you let the whole body die just because you don't want to amputate the limb? Like, the moral thing to do, in my opinion, is what Trump did. I don't think, but the risk is there that future people would use the same power and not use it in a moral way. That's the concern. And if you approach everything through that lens, like, you could look at everything we're seeing right now from the current Trump administration, Trump himself and the administration, which are two separate things. And I honestly see conflicting things. Like Trump, I'm totally cool with what he's doing. He's being very transparent personally. He's doing stuff from the Oval Office. I love the executive orders. I love the game theory behind how he's operating as a president right now. The administration itself, I see separately. I do not like the transparency. I do not think it's moral what they're doing. Like the Bondi mind game binder brigade thing is still very upsetting to me, because it did not need to go down that way. And I'm done being fucked with. Like, stop fucking with us with this stuff. Just, if you don't have it because the FBI withheld the documents, then just say that. Don't rug pull us intentionally, because you knew exactly what you're doing. When you went on Jesse Waters, you knew you didn't have those stuff. You knew what you were going to have to do the next day after the Binder Brigade. That was totally immoral, that whole situation. And I'm not okay with that stuff anymore. But you're right. We can approach these situations and everything. And are we a moral country or are we not? And I like where this is going. Sorry,
and
got a little preachy there.
Not that we need to shout him out because you guys all watch him anyway, but Chris obviously hammers this a lot. That's what a lot of his commentary focuses on. He does a great job of it in terms of like, that is what first principles approaches are all about. And, he's really our signal in that of like, what is, it's important to have the conversations about the frameworks, because, frameworks aren't completely meaningless. Legal frameworks, etc. Sometimes we can feel that way because they've been so corrupted. But the reason that we put these things together is not because there is an inherent value or inherent truth in a framework, in a legal framework. But what there's supposed to be is a consensus protocol. It's supposed to be a way of organizing consensus. And there was an attempt to organize consensus with the original vision of the United States Constitution. Obviously, we've seen that can be corrupted when it strays away from the original intent. But the reason Chris's commentary is so great is that we can never lose that. Why were the founding fathers in that room trying to come up with a consensus protocol? because they wanted to form a cooperative system in order to defend what is right and what is good. Like, they weren't trying to come up with a framework of rules because they thought rules were good. They were trying to come up with a framework and a consensus to protect goodness. And, you know, obviously opinions vary on how successful it was and for how long. And how do we go back to that and try to just defend it more? Or do we have to go more to the decentralization angle, which is what a lot of our commentary network-wide has started to steer toward? Because, you know, and again, just one more point on this executive order is that maybe we're reading too much into some of these things. There's a lot of wiggle room in these deployments, but I like the focus on communications and, like you said earlier, the devolution sandwich idea and Donald Trump of saying, hey, you know what? I'm willing to believe the binder deployment was a white hat deployment, but not because we're supposed to like it. But maybe Trump's like, yeah, get pissed at what's going on here and, you know, let your voices be heard about how you want this stuff handled.
Yeah. When it comes to that stuff, it's like, I can agree that there very likely is, and I do believe there is a plan, something going on behind the scenes. Me not having personal access to it, I have to operate based on what I see, trying to operate within the 72-hour rule, not to react and everything. But there are certain situations you come across where you know you're being lied to, and that's just a certain level I'm not okay with anymore. Like,
yeah,
if I had a significant other who, like, let's say somebody cheated on me and they wanted to tell me, but they were going to do it. They were going to just slowly drip me little clues here and there for a long time. And never actually tell me, but just be like, the choice to know will be yours, man.
Yeah.
Like that's not a moral thing to do. Like long term, that's not a moral thing to do. And so eventually, again, having full understanding of there might be a moral reason they're waiting this long for certain for certain people. I don't have to personally be okay with their justification for it. You know, everybody sets their own standards. We don't have to agree with each other's standards. You just live by the standards that you've created for yourself and don't waver from that, because once you start wavering from your standards, you become a hypocrite. And we just try our best not to be hypocrites around here. We're not perfect either. I can be a hypocrite in some things, but not all things. Only a few.
Yeah,
things.
one of the terms that I use a lot in the truth community is decentralized collective. And I've now originally I used that term to talk about like anons and Q drops and everything. I still believe that. But now I really think of, you know, the more you reverse engineer what the founding fathers, at least some of them, were trying to do, the Ben Franklins of the world, the more impressive they become, not the less impressive. And I think it's because some of them fundamentally understood that what we're trying to do, to your point, is actually not come to nationwide consensus on everything. It's to somehow create a protocol that protects the ability for us not to do that, for us to be decentralized sovereigns who also agree on an overall framework of how to interact with each other, or really more so, how not to interact with each other. What can't we do to each other rather than what can we do? I forget what the terminology is to this, but I had Matt Arrett, our resident Canadian, on the narrative on Sunday night, and he was making that point. He was making that point of, you know, the Canadian system and a lot of these European systems that we're seeing exposed by Trump as well, is that they've got these active rights system where it's all about the legal systems there decide what you can do, where the original constitutional legal system was designed to tell you what you can't do because your fellow citizens have agreed that you can't do this.
That's insane, man. You're right, though. Wherever we're going with this, why can't we just all? It's the being okay with disagreements. That's the part that really gets to me, and that's where we're so messed up in this country, even in like our own side. Like even on Badlands, like we kind of pride ourselves on, you know, it's okay to disagree, guys. We don't all have to believe the same things. We all know that, or at least we like to believe, we're all here for the right reasons. That's why people are on Badlands, because we're friends. We all try to operate with integrity. And as long as I know those few couple things, these people have a home on Badlands. If they don't want to be here, that's totally cool. They can leave. But while you're here, I don't care what you say. I might disagree with what you say, but we can still work towards the same mission.
Right.
be friendly and disagree. As a society, we lost that somewhere.
Yeah.
Like the fact that me and my neighbor across the street, that person is a liberal. We live in the same town. We unfortunately pay the same taxes to go to fix the same road. All these things. We should want what's best for our community as a whole, and we shouldn't have to like hate each other for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That they've created such a divide in this country, and whatever we go back to, that somehow needs to be fixed because it shouldn't be that way. We lost that sense of like unification as a country, regardless of ideologies along the way. And it became, if you disagree with me, then obviously we're at war with each other and we need to burn each other's choice of vehicle, like Teslas and stuff.
Right.
It's just insane. Like yeah, whatever. Sorry.
Yeah, and no, to your point though, I think this all also loops back around to what you mentioned earlier about Donald Trump and the civics lessons, that his second term is about civics lessons. I would also say that the entire Trump era and the character of the Donald that we always talk about is actually encouragingly designed to do exactly what you just said. Trump is, the contentious nature or the tension inherent in many of Donald Trump's narrative deployments are a feature of those deployments and not a bug. Yeah. And we've talked about it a million times in terms of he's trying to highlight certain issues and it's a civics lesson, and I agree with that. But more to the point you just made, I also think there's a cultural component of what that character has been trying to do, which is, guys, you're supposed to vehemently argue your position if you morally believe in that position, but also, to your point, understand that we are on the same side, vehemently arguing these positions going forward. Yeah. And again, remembering that the founding father, like, it's very eye-opening when you're reading this documentation about the founding fathers and how they were unified enough to very literally all risk their lives against the same collectivist enemy while hating each other. Like, being in taverns and being like, this fucking guy, Adams, is such a piece of shit, and yet they're gonna like line up in the same row. They were all writing to each other under pseudonyms and they were the original Anons, meeting in taverns under aliases because they knew they could be killed for what they were doing.
That's so funny. It's so true. I would love to start writing under a pseudonym again, because I tried it before, but just send like hate letters to people I disagree with. But then at the end of it, just be like, you know what? But we're all on the same side. We don't have to hate each other. We're all doing what's best for America.
Speaking of, I think G Money mentioned for Plymouth, we got to try to get to like the Green Dragon Tavern. There's a lot of historical taverns around.
I don't know if I trust G Money to take me out anywhere.
We would just bring Ghost, and then all the memes will be him.
Yeah.
That's narrative shielding.
I need actual shielding from.
Yeah, you bring Ghost out with you so you can't get in trouble with your significant other, because he's just gonna absorb all. You'll be like, I don't remember what happened, but did you see Ghost? Like, yeah, everybody did.
Oh, so funny. He texted me today about Plymouth. I can't wait. There's a G Money story. I can't remember it now, but it's really funny. I posted a meme. I think it was on Twitter. And it was the Sun Tzu quote. It was like, if you don't stand on the rug, it can't be pulled out from under you or something.
Yeah.
And he was like, I feel like that quote should have been attributed to me, not Sun Tzu. I was like, yeah, but people don't like it when you say things, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, basically.
And it's so true. I freaking love that man though. G Money. He's one of those guys I'm talking about where he will not abandon his principles that he believes in for anybody. But at the end of the day, no matter how much you disagree with him, that guy would take a bullet for anybody. Like
absolutely trust.
Totally
high trust individual.
Yes. If I needed something, honestly, one of the first people I would probably call would be G Money. Because if I absolutely needed somebody to answer the phone and come through for me with whatever I asked, he would probably be the guy I call, because I know he'd answer.
I've literally told Mrs.
Unless the question was, hey man, I need you to buy XRP. Otherwise they're going to kill me. Then he wouldn't do it. But that's about it.
Like I've told, but besides his expertise in the subject matter, I've told her, like, hey, if something happens to me, I understand that if I've been stacking some sats, and if G ends up being right about this stuff 20 years from now, that kind of thing could be life-changing, even if it's a modest amount right now. If something happens to me, I understand that this shit is complicated, so call G. And like he will he will not steal our sats. Like I know he wouldn't. I know he would not do that.
I have him and Patriots in Progress on my
Pimp,
thing in my safe. Like if I die, this is who you call, Mom, because I know you're not gonna be able to figure this out.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a weird tangent, but
anyway, so if you guys die, leave it in your wills to have your kids called G Money, and he'll get it all sorted.
He totally would though. He
wouldn't take a penny for it.
No. Well,
maybe one sat.
He might take a sat, but he wouldn't rob you blind. Anyway, let's I feel like we're getting some newbies in the chat, by the way. So for those who are new, welcome to Badlands Media, our network here. I think we must be featured on Rumble's homepage or something. Here's how you guys found us. But welcome, Badlands Media. We are a network of all different kinds of shows all day long. Follow us here. Follow us on social media. I think you guys
or don't. It's up to you guys.
Totally up to you.
Should
we talk economics?
Queued up.
The cash clip.
Yeah, because I think it's relevant to what we were just talking about and kind of got derailed.
We did, but that was a good conversation.
Yeah,
I'm glad we did. Here we go.
Okay, now our next question. Yes, what is your?
This is at a Reawaken tour. This was back. Gosh, when was this? I can find it. I'll play it and then I'll find.
Question there, sir. What's your first name? Where are you from? And what's your question?
Okay. Hi, my name's Mike. These days I'm from just about everywhere, and I'd like to ask Cash a question in regards to the DoD continuity policy that was just updated 3 days ago and made about 25% longer than the one 4 years ago.
So what he's talking about is when there's this thing called COOP-COG activities, continuation of government activities and policies, and DoD being the no-fail mission is on top of the chart in case something happens to government leadership or we're under attack and things like that. And the extension you're talking about, I believe, is referring, I haven't seen the details because the details aren't actually public.
So a couple things. First, it's from 6/12/2024. That's when I saved the video anyway. What he is referring to is the Department of Defense came up with this update to their continuity policy. We went over this a long time ago, and it was public. It was just a Department of Defense directive. Those are on the website, on their DoD website. It was a public thing. But what's interesting is here right away, he's going to, well, continuity stuff, that's not public information. That should be classified. So that's like where his mind first goes. And then he ties it to election stuff as well. He's about to. So pay attention, because this is why it's so interesting.
This is the key.
What I think he's alluding to is that what are they, the Biden administration, doing in terms of continuity of government that may interfere with our election cycle? And that's something we should actually be keenly aware of. It's not something that many people talk about. It's actually a great question, and I wish I had the actual answer, but the only way to get that is to be in the Biden administration. The other way to do it is to challenge it in court and go to federal court and force the disclosure of that information so you all and we can see what they are planning ahead of the election before it's too late.
Yeah, so not realizing that it's a public document. The first place his mind goes is that should be classified. We should figure out what they're doing. We should be keenly aware of what the Biden administration might do, because somehow continuity of government could interfere in the election in some fashion. And then I wonder if that last part is a little challenge. Like, if we want to know more about what Trump did, do we need to go to court and request some FOIAs?
I don't disagree with that, but I take it in the context of this new EO a little differently. Maybe we are thinking along the same lines, but
probably not.
First of all, you said the first place his mind goes. I think it's the first place his words go. I think we know that Cash knows what he's saying and knows what's what, or we believe that anyway, right? The way that hits me now is if you strip away the context of the 2020 election, I think what he was doing there was he was rerouting the question about continuity of government and devolution, and he was putting a concerning skin on it and saying what we've been talking about tonight, which is, we as American citizens should probably know the continuity of government capabilities of the federal government, and we should probably have disclosures as to what they can do and what they could do in the future. And the reason I thought of that clip after, you pointed out this executive order today is that a lot of this executive order is talking about communications infrastructure, communications with the states, communications with the people. And it made me think of that and say, was Cash trying to say, like, listen, we're not going to talk about the COG operations that we've been involved with, but in the future, this kind of thing could be used very badly. Like, if the deep state tries to do this in a future administration, they could do it for entirely different reasons, but they could legally do it, right? Like, if we're talking about why Trump had constitutional authority to implement devolution, all the deep state has to do, especially with an all hazards approach, is say that such and such, maybe the MAGA movement, is a threat to the federal government, which means it's a threat to the national essential functions of that government, and therefore we are implementing a continuity of government operation. So Cash is saying,
way reading
like,
into that. Like,
I think that's what he was saying.
No way.
And he was using the election to say that.
No, because he was not expecting that question. He clearly wasn't.
I know. He spun it. Yeah,
but so like his reaction to the question is right away like, well, first of all, that should be classified. Okay, so his interpretation of the question was anything related to continuity of government like that, we wouldn't actually know about. It shouldn't be a public document. So what the hell? And then he goes into and ties it directly to election stuff. I don't think in the minute and a half answer to a question he wasn't expecting, which he even said, he's like, well, that's a great question. We should really be thinking about that. I don't think he was trying to like forecast down the road of how we should be approaching things in future continuity government stuff. But the takeaways are it should have been classified. So his experience with continuity government stuff is classified. And number two, it's continuity government and elections are connected. Like those are the takeaways for me, because how many people, when you talk continuity government, think elections? Like if you just go up and ask anybody that is familiar with what continuity government is,
right,
would they connect it to elections? I doubt it. Unless they're
I just don't think those two things are mutually exclusive, but that's okay. We can agree to disagree on that. I agree with what you're saying, by the way. I agree that I agree with everything you just said. Yeah. I just also think that if they did know
everything you said, though.
I'm just saying that I don't think it's unrealistic to imagine that if they know where things are going in the future, i.e. now, at the time, in terms of like changing the framework around which these things are implemented in the future, if they already knew that, they would be able to start seeding that in advance, even if it was unprompted. Like I agree, or it was prompted.
I just don't see
in
that,
the moment.
That's what he was seeding. I feel like that I just feel like it's a reach. I get what you're trying to say, and I get that's exactly like that would make it fit the executive order we went through earlier. I just don't think there's a there.
I just think he was using the election as a scenario that was easy to map onto, of saying, for example, if a bad administration wanted to implement a continuity of government plan to cover up a stolen election,
sure,
they would do it, right? But either way, it's the same general idea where he's saying, I think we agree that he is generally he's leading it into elections, he's tying it to elections, but I think he's also trying to hint at that transparency angle and saying, like, you as the American people should know what's going on in the federal government when it comes to continuity of government.
No, I don't think so.
And wasn't there another clip? Wasn't there didn't he get asked about this again, or am I making that up?
No, he got asked at it was this one I think you're thinking of. And this it also makes the clip we just watched funny, because he says in there, he was like, "Oh, most people don't talk about the continuity of government stuff, you know, like most people don't know about it." Let me see if I can even play that one more time.
Way to do
just
it
that part
is to challenge it in court and go to federal court and force the disclosure of that information, so you all and we can see what they are planning ahead of the election.
Let's see what you're saying. I got to find the part where he's like, "That's a great question."
On top of the chart, in case something. So what he's talking about is when there's this thing called COOP-COG activities, continuation of government activities and policies, and DOD being the no-fail mission is on top of the chart in case something happens to government leadership or we're under attack and things like that. And the extension you're talking about, I believe, is referring, I haven't seen the details because the details
Sorry, we're just watching the whole clip now.
But what I think he's alluding to is that what are they, the Biden administration, doing in terms of continuity of government
That's
that
the
may
swerve.
interfere with
That's
our
the
election
swerve.
cycle?
I see what you're saying there. I get it. I see what you're saying. I still think it's a little.
Yeah, it's a
I can
it's a
see why
reach.
you'd say it.
I'll give you it's a reach. I feel like he intentionally would you agree with this? Cash knows what that guy meant by his question, and Cash intentionally misreads the intention of the question because he has to.
Why would I agree with that? That's like a word salad.
No, like because of the next clip you're about to play.
Well, let me finish this clip. Let me finish this clip so he hasn't said the part I want him to say yet.
Okay.
And that's something we should actually be keenly aware of. It's not something that many people talk about. It's actually a great question.
That right there. It's not something many people actually talk about. That's a great question. So, but this next clip from the Reawaken
We have
tour.
time for one final question before we introduce our final.
And this clip happened before the clip we just played, like
Yeah.
in the timeline. I don't remember exactly when the date was, but
Final presenter.
Gentlemen, I just want to know if y'all are familiar with the theory of devolution, and do we have any hope that President Trump might have devolved the government before he left office?
I'm going to punt to General.
so keep in mind, Devolution is my series, Devolution.link. Watch Cash's answer here, because the last clip he said that's something not many people talk about. Devolution is a continuity government plan.
General Flynn.
I have no idea.
Devin Nunes.
I have no idea either.
Kash Patel.
I have absolutely no idea, and if you're following some other guy on Truth Social named Patel, it's not me.
Okay.
I have no idea what these people are talking about, but if you want to follow the guy who wrote the series that you're asking the question about, you should go look for. Yeah. So
he
I
knows
just
exactly.
think.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, it's important you laid out the timeline because that's key to my threadbare theory that I'm clinging to, is that Cash knows what the intention of that woman's question was. And I think he also knows damn well what that guy meant at the next conference Reawaken tour he was at. And he rephrases it and goes, what this guy means is, what if the Biden administration does this?
Yeah.
I don't think Cash thinks that that's what the guy meant. I think he spun it for the reasons you laid out. But I think Cash knew that the guy was asking about the Trump administration implementing devolution.
No. Because the guy was asking about the Biden administration's document. It was the same day.
But I think he was asking about it because he was reading your research.
Well, so it was on Twitter that I posted about the update of the continuity policy. And it was like that day or the very next day that the guy that he was referring to an actual Biden administration or Biden DOD update to the continuity policy. He was talking about a real thing.
I know.
And I think it's also true that Kash Patel did not actually, he was not aware of that update.
Oh, really? I don't think so.
I think it's entirely possible. Like,
It's possible, yeah.
I don't think they're aware of every single thing that was coming out of the Biden administration. And we don't even know how read in Cash is. Like, he was chief of staff to Chris Miller. I think he's very involved, but it's highly compartmentalized. We don't even know if he's fully involved or read in on the actual devil plan. We just don't know. We don't know any of that stuff.
It's all fair.
Yeah.
So. I can't prove what I'm saying. I'm just saying. I just think it's interesting how it lines up either way. It's interesting how he's talking about transparency there and all that. And
I'm just going to take it a little more at face value than like, here's some hidden subtle context message. You know what I mean? But anyway, we should talk about the finance stuff that we're going to talk about and then get to the rants.
Yeah.
Do you have the article? I have to go pee while you're, so I'm going to let you do your thing for a minute.
Yeah, sure. You guys saw this. I'll use the Badlands write-up on it. So there was a FOMC meeting where the Federal Reserve comes out there and says a bunch of bullshit about interest rates, and the header coming out of it, Federal Reserve holds interest rates steady, citing economic uncertainty. Fed Chair Jerome Powell has maintained a steady stance despite ongoing uncertainty. Quote, despite elevated levels of uncertainty, the U.S. economy continues to be in a good place. We do not need to be in a hurry, and we are well positioned to wait for greater clarity. So that was an older quote, but today he essentially said, we're not raising interest rates any higher, but we're not cutting interest rates right now. The alternative media, the financial media, basically read that. They called it the Powell put. There's all this stupid financial lingo about how they try to figure out what these Fed guys are saying and what they're going to do in the future. The feeling coming out of the FOMC meeting today was that we're going to get rate cuts, but Powell doesn't want to do that. And I don't know if it was last week or the week before on this show, I had brought up the theory that I think what Trump is doing here, I think he's got the Federal Reserve in a pincer. And I think that pincer move was implemented in 2020 when Trump was publicly railing on the Federal Reserve for having interest rates too high. This was at the start of lockdowns, and he was saying we need cuts in interest rates because we need liquidity in the system, etc. The Fed ended up caving to Trump and lowered interest rates. We got that crazy quantitative easing cycle. We got inflation, etc. During the Biden era, the Federal Reserve had to raise interest rates the whole time to try to stop the runaway train of inflation. Instead, what they got was a bit of a recession in employment and inflation because there was too much liquidity in the system, right? So they're screwed. And Jerome Powell is very public in recent months of saying he does not want to cut interest rates and does not want to do what Trump wants him to do. So the last week on Twitter and everything, I've said, look for Trump to start very publicly leaning on Jerome Powell to cut interest rates. And I think it's a trap. Trump wants them to cut interest rates because we're in the midst of a monetary transition that you and I have talked about a lot. And in order to get the mandate for that transition, you basically need a super weak dollar. You need all this liquidity in the system. And he wants Americans' asset prices to go back up and to take the credit for that. This is what Trump wants.
Yeah.
So right after I put another tweet out to that effect, early, like an hour before the show, Trump puts out this. She hasn't said anything about the Fed in a little bit. The Fed would be much better off cutting rates as U.S. tariffs start to ease their way into the economy. Do the right thing. April 2nd is Liberation Day in America. So I think he gave away the game here. Like you could see it coming from a mile away.
Can you put that back up?
Yeah.
A couple things I want to point out with that. But you go ahead and finish yours.
To finish that point up, he's got the Federal Reserve caught. I don't know if I've explained this well, but essentially the Fed is caught between a rock and a hard place. They can't raise interest rates anymore because we're entering a recession. If they cut interest rates, they know that there is way too much liquidity in the system and inflation is going to go absolutely insane, which is going to make Americans wonder, how did the dollar get to this point? And Trump is going to be able to say, probably because of the Federal Reserve, so we need to rein them in.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many interesting things going on with the economy. The reason Trump posted this today is because Powell went out and did his, I don't know if it's monthly or whatever they do, where they talk about, they announced to the world whether they're going to raise or lower the rates, and they kept it the same. And then he also gave a very wrong explanation as to why we're seeing inflation in the first 2 months of this year. He blamed it on Trump's tariffs, which makes no sense because he hasn't even fully implemented the tariffs yet. And let me play this clip.
How much of it is tariff? So let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariff and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation.
Trump's implementation of the tariffs, like the reciprocal ones anyway, doesn't happen until April 2nd. The ones he's implemented on Mexico, Mexico has been postponed because Mexico, Scheinbaum or whatever her name is, keeps bending the knee. Canada's, okay, maple syrup tariffs, whatever, all those things. I don't think that's really having a tangible effect. We don't import that much from Canada. Maybe some China stuff, but it's
10%.
Yeah, it's minuscule.
Yeah.
It's not causing the inflation. But the interesting thing, as we said last week, the way the recession is going to work, like it's going to look like we're having this recession and we have all this uneasiness in the market because of Trump's threat of tariffs and talk of tariffs. The stock market has not been performing that well. We're going to be have less government spending. The tariffs are going to impact the export import. And so technically we're going to be in a recession. And when people are in a recession, they get afraid, they move their stuff out of the stocks, they go buy bonds or treasuries or whatever. And that is going to force them to lower rates, which is going to force the interest rates of your homes and everything else to come down as well. It's going to, the effect of what the position Trump has them in, like you're saying, like the pincer, it's honestly kind of perfect when you think about it, because while we're cutting the government spending, which is a good thing, while we're getting rid of the illegal aliens and all the illegal labor that's been in this country, the false propped up labor, that's a good thing. While we're bringing investments and infrastructure and American companies here, we're encouraging the investment in America. That's a good thing. All these good things are happening, and it's going to have the optics of a bad thing because by definition and the formula created by the Fed, it's technically a recession, which is going to force the interest rates to come down in this good environment, which is going to just explode once we cross that threshold. It's literally perfect.
Exactly. That's well put. Like the story. Imagine a scenario 6 months from now, let's say, because this isn't going to be overnight. Imagine a scenario 6 months from now where things are getting so much better for your average American. As you just mentioned, interest rates are going to be going down. There's going to be deflation across the board in terms of goods prices. Food prices are going to be coming down. Meanwhile, the mainstream and financial media and the bankers themselves are going to be screaming from the rooftops that everything is horrible at the same time. So it's going to become so partisan and so obvious. And my long-term view on this, of the pincer move, is that Trump and Bessent's interviews have been awesome lately in terms of telling you like what the plan is. Because he's saying, like, we're not worried about Wall Street. We're not worried about like 401ks right now, because again, you don't cash out your 401k like in March 2025. That's not how that shit works. The people who are underwater right now are all the hedge funds who rely on margin calls to fuck the American people to make their money. They're the ones holding the bag right now. The guys holding Tesla stock are holding it. They're fine. They're going to be fine when it bounces back because it's a company with real value. So what we're going into is there's a bifurcation happening right now with this propped up fake stock market, which has become a casino. And everybody's going to be disincentivized. To your point about government bonds and treasuries, people are going to be pulling their money out of value-less companies and putting it into real assets, also known as the real economy. It's coming out of the government, as you said. But then the money that does go back into the stock market is going to be hunting real value, companies with real valuations. So we're actually going to see, in my opinion, a flipping of the S&P 500, where the companies that stick in it are real value-added American companies.
Could
like,
also be,
for example,
don't forget the crypto. Don't forget the crypto side of things. They could be putting into crypto, which Trump is also propping up. Like, again, it's so interesting. It could get to the point where the Fed and the games they play and their definition of recession, people are going to realize, like, okay, well, this is actually totally meaningless. Like, it's just a psyop.
Right. And to your point about crypto, we talk about Bitcoin a lot, but a lot of the stuff Bessent's talking about recently is stablecoin regulation. So I've really been trying to educate myself on that because I didn't used to understand it very well, besides the fact that stablecoins are pegged to the value of currencies. But man, it is starting to look like the plan might be introduce US stablecoin regulation, which essentially privatizes the dollar, but in a free market setting. So you could have all these companies offering stablecoins pegged to the value of the US dollar. You get the Trump administration that backs the US dollar with real assets again, such as Bitcoin and other things, maybe gold, maybe oil, maybe a basket of commodities. So who do you not need in that scenario? If you have a stable coin that people can trade in and out of, that is tied to the value of the US dollar. And if the US dollar is now based on an asset basket that the Trump administration controls, the Treasury, who don't you need? You don't need the Federal Reserve anymore. Because they issue the currency. If the new currency is stablecoins that are regulated, you don't need the banks. You don't need, you need banks for investments, but you no longer need currency producers. That's what it does for them. And Howard Lutnick has been talking about this a lot, which is why he was in an interview in like October 2024 with Anthony Pompliano. And Pompliano started to talk about stablecoins, and Lutnick shushed him as a joke and basically was like, we don't want to talk about that because we want to be friends with the central bankers, right? So he's saying, like, I think, yeah, we're basically going to take away their money printer. And then one more deployment on this that came out today or yesterday. What was Elon Musk talking about in the last couple of days? It got all these headlines. Magic money printers or computers. True. So, I don't know. They're laying the groundwork of saying, like, we need to take away the ability for these institutions to create money out of nothing. Ash in the chat says, but you still need banks, ? For now. Maybe not forever. I'm saying, when we use the word banks in the modern vernacular, we're usually talking about currency producers. I don't think the banks should be able to issue money. I'm saying the idea of a bank would go back to the original idea of a bank, which is investing in a small business, etc., giving a small business a loan. Which everyone in the Trump administration, for the people who think like that's inherently evil, every member of the Trump administration, including Trump, has publicly said that they're in favor of that. Like local banks investing in local businesses. But, you know, when we think bank, we think Federal Reserve. That's the stuff. Central banks, Ash, I'm mansplaining banks to you right now because you're asking dumb bank questions. Jeez. We are being featured on the Rumble homepage right now. That's why we got about 4,000 or 5,000 more views than normal, I would say. So again, welcome. To anybody who's new here, what we sometimes do is we have this woman on the channel, Ash, and maybe just don't even say it. Maybe just don't even say it. I'm gonna lose all the new viewers. She's often on Fresh and Fit. Yeah, which by the way, did you see it right next to it? Yeah. That's totally Ash's crew. 100%. It's our competition. So welcome, guys. If you're coming over from Fresh and wherever you're coming over from. But all right. So again, welcome all new people. Make sure you follow us here. We have great content all day long. We should probably get to the rants. Before we do that, just a couple quick things. Number one, don't even try. Don't even bring that up. I'm not allowing it. I was saving it, and I'm devastatingly correct. No, you're not, bro. This is America. We don't say Japanese words any other way than it's just going to take 1 second. State. Not happening. Totally interrupting my show here now, bro. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, hit the thumbs up. We'd greatly appreciate it if you like the show tonight. I'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern for the Daily Herald. When are you on next? Sunday night, The Narrative. We're doing for the first ever, I'm ashamed to admit this, the first ever repeat guest on The Narrative is the Canadian. Because we didn't talk about what I named the episode about. And people liked the beginning of that conversation. So we're going to talk about the actual subject, which is the idea of a multipolar pincer move, speaking of pincers, between the US and Russia, what it was supposed to look like during the Civil War, before the Civil War, and what it could look like in the future. So he's got some cool stuff on that. I can't believe your first repeat guest is a Canadian. I know. It's embarrassing. It's a low point. You're married to a Canadian, so maybe it's ex-Canadian. It's fitting for you. Well, whatever. Your kid is part Canadian. No, just always remember he's that. Not. Yes, he is. He's got some maple syrup running through those. I just looked at him as if to check. Yeah, it's like, is this Canadian showing? Oh man. Oh yeah, and then also one more reminder. Make sure you guys get your GART tickets. For those who are not familiar with what GART is, we do conferences all over the country. They're more like parties. They kind of are like parties, but it's when you get together with people who share a common interest, common goal. You know, we've all been through the phases where it's like your family hates you because you're support of Trump or whatever stuff you believe in, your friends, spouses, whatever it is.
when you get around like-minded people, it's a life-changing experience. It really is. I encourage you to come to a Guard if you can. We're also looking at doing some things to, maybe outside of Guard events, more of the Badlanders meetups. We'll get there, but we're gonna do one quick Rumble Studio commercial to support Rumble as well, and then we're gonna get to the rants. So bear with us while I read this Rumble Studio. What do we got here? The Kids Guide. Let's do this one. Does that sound interesting? The Kids Guide. Should we do that one?
I have no idea what.
I don't know either. It's one of Rumble's ads here, so let's try it.
If it supports Rumble, then I'm cool with it.
Let's do it. Okay. For the parents out there, I'm sure by now you're familiar with the Kids Guide, co-founded by Mike Huckabee. Well, the Kids Guide wants to know whether or not you approve of Doge. Please take a minute to head over to dogechoice.com right now to cast your vote and see how more than 15,000 other parents who've already voted feel about Doge. Remember, vote at dogechoice.com. Whether you choose yes or no in the Kids Guide Doge poll, when you visit dogechoice.com, you'll be thanked with a free gift bundle featuring 2 Kids Guides. You'll get the Kids Guides to President Trump and the Kids Guide to Elon Musk, both for free. So your kids can learn how they're using Doge to slash government waste. Remember, that's dogechoice.com to cast your vote. You get a free gift bundle for your kids.
That's pretty epic, like seeing little based kids reading about Doge. Could you tell me about Doge again, Dad?
I'm curious. I'll have to do that and read to my kids.
Yep.
My son is like, he's a first grader. He reads at like a 3rd grade level right now. And he's likes
So
reading stuff.
Better than you read the EO tonight is what you're saying.
He reads at a higher level than I do. That is 100% certain.
Right.
But I'm going to have to go fill that thing out and, I don't know, maybe try it.
Right.
See if we read it. Learn about Doge.
Now,
Okay,
how
let's.
would he pronounce this?
I don't know.
I'm just telling you. Can let you off on that one, but
Thanks, bro. Let's do the rants. Oh, do we have any boosts, by the way?
we do actually. Let me make sure they're refreshed.
By the way, the Badlands boosts, if you're watching on replay and you want to leave a rant that we'll read on air, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv, click on boost, and just select the right show, and we'll go through those and read those live as if you left a rant.
Okay, I don't think we got these. Master Chemo sent $100 with no comment, just $100 last week for the show.
Thank you.
So much appreciated. Vince sent $17. That thing is not stinking real regarding Joe Biden 2015 versus 2019, Joe. We've known the signature was different for 5 years. The boots everyone had in 2020, stuff happened. Also, 2017 capitulation tour, a lot has already happened.
Yeah.
I mean, can't argue with that. Vince sent another one. $17. Follow the pen. We were not all on Parler in 2020 through March or April. J6 videos, Castle Rock, fake Joe Biden, his fake Oval Office, and the fake White House. We watched him not sign a stack of EOs in the first week. Devolution proof.
Were you ever on Parler?
I was not.
I think I was for a little bit.
Wasn't into it. I was on Gab for a little bit.
I never got on Gab. I mean, I think I created an account there, but I never posted there. Parler, I tried, and then it like disappeared. I don't even remember what happened to that. I think when I first started my stuff, I started an account over there. Who knows? Might even exist. Which is the one that Bannon Getter? That's Getter, right?
I wasn't on that either.
Yeah, we streamed there for a while. But anyway, is that all of them?
Branding is so horrible. No. We have UKQ Patriot, $5. What troubles me about John's devolution theory is the way it completely bypasses judicial review and congressional oversight. How can Devo preserve the constitutional form of government when kept secret from other two co-equal branches of government? It's the whole theme of our show, or one of the
whole theme of the show. Well, number one, we don't know for sure that there was no congressional involvement. Like, what if certain people, Gang of 8 or Gang of 4, I don't know. We don't know if Supreme Court could have been read in on it, or a majority of it. We don't know what we don't know. But then again, it comes down to the constitutionality of what Trump did. Is it within his authority? And I believe it is. If you go read my introduction article, there's a Campbell versus Clinton. I think it's a circuit court ruling, but it's based off of a Supreme Court ruling back during the Price cases from Lincoln, talking about how, if there doesn't have to be a declaration of war by Congress, war can exist based on the actions of a country, And the court made clear that it would not question the president on actions deemed necessary to repel foreign aggression. And if Trump interpreted the actions of whether it was a foreign country or domestic terrorist organization or transnational criminal organization, whatever, because he changed the definition of those along the way, which makes it plausible.
Right.
If he deemed those actions of stealing an election, implementing COVID to steal an election, we don't know exactly what he did, but if he deemed it as an act of war, he can basically respond however he sees fit. And if he sees that there's, stolen seats in Congress, maybe there's compromised people in the Supreme Court. If Trump knows all this stuff or has this evidence, again, I know speculation, but it's not a stretch to say like, well, I can't disclose this to Congress. I can't disclose this to SCOTUS, even though it's possible he did, because they're compromised. They're just as involved. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it doesn't even really matter what they think. It's what the people think. It's all about the masses. If the people see what happened and the way Trump responded, if it's ever disclosed, will they be okay with it? And I think they will be, but we don't know how this is going to play out. He played it out to the full extent where he never had to reveal he implemented it. He played the full narrative gambit of, I walked away from a stolen election and I got back into an office based on a real election, is what they're telling us,
right.
Except he's telling us it's fake. But that's a
Public
great question.
Mandate.
Great question.
Public mandate is what he's been running on, and what he's been leading his narratives with, and that's what it's all about, I think.
Yep.
Couple more boosts. Lionheart sent over $50 tonight. Hey guys, Dems and Libs are no longer hiding their true feelings and directives. Schumer was literally mocking anyone who wanted to keep more of their own money, which they earned all by themselves. Satanic. God bless.
God bless.
I'll say. Did you see that the EU is going to start reserving the right to take possession of savings if you're not using them? Like, how does unused savings? Did you see that?
I did not see that. That's insane if that's true.
They gave themselves the right to go after unused savings.
So what's the point of savings?
How does one define unused savings? I mean, man,
if you're saving money but not using it, we're gonna take it for ourselves. That is nuts.
The EU is gonna get wild, I think. I mean, we've got like 2 countries right now arresting political opposition. Romania.
I don't think they have the balls. I really don't. Yeah. I don't know if the people there have the balls to do what they need to do to fix the problem. We can display what it means to be sovereign all we want, and I think we're going to. I think Trump is trying to get us to do that. I think Trump is encouraging places like Canada and Greenland and who knows where else by threatening to take him over. Like, hey, we'll take him to the United States. But then he comes out and says, we support your sovereignty. If you choose to be part of the United States, we'll gladly accept you. But that's your decision. You're a sovereign people. You're a sovereign nation, whatever. He's encouraging the sovereignty all over the world. Whether those people choose to take it up, that's up to them. And I want nothing to do with it. If they're gonna allow that stuff, if they're gonna allow their government to take their savings because they aren't using it, then they deserve to have it taken. If you're gonna allow it, you deserve it. Anyway,
should have been wearing that, Europeans. And then final boost. Plymouth Patriot sends $10 over. Hey John and BB, Plymouth is awesome. Can't wait for Guard 8. Got my VIP ticket. It's a block from the ocean. We have a great New England Badlanders group that will be there. It's literally 15 minutes from my house. Looking forward to meeting you all.
Awesome. I really just can't wait to go on long walks on the beach with all the Badlanders in attendance. We should just do
Plymouth
one big
beach. Isn't really.
There's no beach.
It's more.
We're on
of
the
a
ocean,
harbor.
but no beach.
It's a harbor.
Can we at least
If you
throw
want the
tea
beach,
in?
you got to go down the Cape.
We should all go get some tea and just chuck it into the harbor.
We should.
Symbolically.
The cruise that I met my wife on, my buddy that was on that cruise convinced some other girls that Boston Harbor still tastes like tea. And they believed it all week. No way. I've never forgotten
Who believed it?
These girls on the cruise. Not Mrs. Bright. She was too quick for that.
What hair
that was
color
the test.
were these
too
girls?
Quick-witted. Oh, it was like a Hispanic or something. Who knows?
Okay,
Who can remember? There were so many,
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Okay, are you done with the?
Yeah.
Okay,
that's all.
Let's do the rants. Jade, I'm going to say Ducci. That's awfully close to douchey, depending what country you're in when you're pronouncing that. JFK assassination was MK Ultra in its early stages. I would totally believe that. I can get on board with that theory.
Yeah.
By the way, hit the thumbs up, guys. Greatly appreciate it. S. Boosin, John, did you see the interviews Matthew Trump did with the guy who claims to have been hired by Chicago mob and shot JFK? What are your thoughts? Interesting stuff. I actually did not see that, but now I'm very
I didn't
curious.
see it either, but speaking of MK Ultra, again, compartmentalization. There's probably a lot of people who think they were involved in it that weren't involved in it.
Yep. 1027JS, thanks for reading the docs and giving your interpretation of what you read. Thank you, Joe, fellow North Dakotan. Appreciate that. Tiger Girl 76, Rush Limbaugh wrote a series of children's real history books. My boys loved them when they were younger. He's a history teacher in the books with a time-traveling horse. Your kids will love the humor. I'll have to check that out.
Interesting.
Books and coffee. A Japanese person would pronounce it sake, an American sake.
So let me get this straight.
What country are we in again?
Books
What
and
country are we in
coffee.
again?
What
country are we in?
language are we speaking? So we're taking direction on how to pronounce words by
Yeah.
somebody else's language.
This is America. We pronounce things the way we want, bro.
Just telling you, the correct pronunciation is sake.
Not in America.
Well,
Not in America. Dave L. Simpson, good evening. Just got here and rewinded and I'm watching from the beginning of the show. Has Sam Mooney Giancana's name came up in the JFK files yet? Just curious. Recently read Double Crossed.
who knows? I don't know.
I don't remember. I've seen a lot of names. I don't think so. Don't think so, but very well could have. Kitsko, Trump is telling us it is time by highlighting the Declaration of Independence today. That is interesting. He has it in his office now.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good point, Kitsko.
Back to the basics.
Yeah, and it was good seeing her at GART Vegas. Hopefully we'll see at Plymouth too. Jay Ducci, soy boys have never had their asses kicked in real life. That is all that this country needs. I can get on board with that. Ekim Navilis, beanie, beanie, beanie. Don't know why. Is Tim Pool?
Is it a Tim Pool reference? He was on the front page.
I gotta admit, it's pretty crazy that you just say beanie and the first thing that comes to mind is Tim Pool. Like,
right.
Props
Yeah,
to
I don't
Tim
know.
Pool on that.
The top picks are Badlands, Fresh and Fit, as we talked about, the Thespians, Timcast, and Dr. Disrespect.
Nice.
Good company to be in overall-ish.
One
I
of
like
the
Doc. I like Dr. Disrespect.
Yeah, that's the one I'd like to. The other two I could go without. Wedge Gravy, you're the feature show on Rumble app right now. That's awesome. Thank you, Wedged. We need to go back to the gold standard and use Bitcoin for settling international trade. Bitcoin can be easily converted, manipulation free.
I'm willing. We are willing to go on Fresh and Fit and talk about devolution.
You said we. I'm not sure I'm there yet.
You're not willing?
I need to know.
I'll go as ambassador.
No, I'm not willing to do that either. I need to know who else is going to be on the show. I'm not just going to go on Fresh and Fit with a bunch of e-thoughts and like.
Why not? We got to red pill the e-thoughts, man. How are we
Do we
supposed
really
to
need
wake
to,
up the
though?
normies
Do
on
we really need
OnlyFans? Not a single e-thought is talking devolution.
Like we're going to be on there talking devolution and they're just going to be talking body counts and stuff. And I just
Yeah.
don't see that kind of crossover. But hey, if they invite us, we will consider it with much gratitude. The invite to be on Fresh and Fit. It's crazy. Wedged Gravy, Miss Real Freedom Fighter says, I love your content. Really great stuff. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
And Wedged Gravy, difference between being a citizen and a subject. You're absolutely right.
Damn straight.
I don't know if I have any good videos lined up to.
Speaking of subjects, a lot of Canadians don't know their subjects. It's pretty wild though. You guys should check that episode out, the narrative last Sunday, because this Sunday it's like a direct continuation. We heard from a real life actual Canadian exactly why in detail Canada is fake. So pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna end on this video. I think this is the one. Yeah, this is a good video. Stephen Miller. God, he's so good. Stephen Miller.
Yeah, he's been great.
He's been awesome. Okay, hit the thumbs up. We'll see you tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern on the Daily Herald. And yeah, thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
The real answer, Rob, is that the communist judges are issuing injunctions against President Trump because he is the first president in our lifetimes to reassert the rule of law and constitutional order in this country, to say illegal aliens cannot live here, to say that foreign criminal gangs cannot menace our citizens, to say that unelected bureaucrats do not control the direction of federal policy, to say that foreign aid is not a right, but a foreign policy function vested in Article 2 and the Commander-in-Chief. These are the core principles of the Constitution that undergird our entire democracy. The injunctions are an effort by the radical left to prevent the American people from having the restoration and change they voted for.
Yeah.
The way these judges look at it is they say, you don't get to have the country you want. You don't get to vote for the change you want. They want all power vested in the bureaucracy and the judiciary, and none in the American people.
Yeah.
This issue was litigated, Rob, for the last 8 years. The issue of rogue judges, the issue of radical left judges, the issue of local judges assuming awesome powers that do not belong to them. And the American people went to the voting booth and they said, we want democracy back, we want our freedom back, and we want Donald Trump back. And that's what they're going to get, Rob.